between the Emperor's will and the weakness of mortal flesh. Clad in a black greatcoat that billows in the smoke of battle, crowned with a peaked cap that towers above the common soldier, armed with a bolt pistol whose report can mean salvation or damnation, the Imperial Commissar is both savior and executioner, both inspiration and terror. This is the story of their final orders. The last commands given when all hope seems lost, when the enemy presses forward like an unstoppable tide, when retreat would mean survival, but advancement means certain death. These are the moments when the Commissar must make the ultimate choice, not just for themselves, but for every soul under their command. These are the moments that define what it means to serve the God Emperor of mankind in the 41st millennium. The Commissar's greatcoat is not simply a uniform. It is a statement, a declaration of authority that transcends the normal chains of command. When a Commissar walks onto the battlefield, that coat speaks louder than any words. It says that here walks judgment itself, that here stands an officer who answers not to colonels or generals, but to the Imperium itself, to the distant throne on Terra, where the Emperor endures his eternal vigil. The coat is always black as the void between stars, as black as the fate that awaits those who fail in their duty. Some commissars wear their coats pristine and immaculate, the fabric perfect despite the mud and blood of war, a psychological weapon as much as any gun. Others wear coats that bear the scars of 100 battles, lace burns patched with rough thread, edges frayed from years of service, medals and honors pinned in rows that tell a story of survival and service that spans decades. The peaked cap sits high on the Commissar's head, making them taller, more imposing, more visible across the battlefield. In the chaos of war, when smoke obscures vision and the screams of the dying drown out orders, that cap serves as a beacon. Soldiers know that if they can see that distinctive silhouette, if they can make out that peaked cap rising above the trenches, then someone is still in control, someone still maintains order, someone still carries the Emperor's authority into this hell. And if that cap should fall, if it should tumble from a Commissar's head as they collapse from enemy fire, then every soldier who witnesses it knows that something fundamental has shifted. The presence that kept them fighting, that kept them from breaking, that stood as a bulwark against their own fear, is gone. But before a Commissar can give their final order, before they can stand as that last bastion of Imperial authority on a collapsing battlefield, they must first be forged. And that forging begins in the Schola Progenium, in the grim institutions where the Kisons, Imperium transforms the orphans of war into its most devoted servants. The Schola Progenium facilities exist on countless worlds across the Imperium, austere buildings deliberately constructed in isolated regions far from the distractions of civilization. Within their walls, a unique transformation takes place, one that strips away childhood and replaces it with unwavering devotion to the Emperor. The children who enter these institutions, known as progena, are not random orphans plucked from the streets. They are the sons and daughters of imperial officers, of noble families, of those who have died in service to the Imperium. Their parents gave their lives for the Emperor's realm, and now their children will be given the tools to do the same. The youngest progeny, mere infants and toddlers, spend their early years in communal nurseries overseen by Sisters Hospitaller. These are perhaps the only gentle moments these children will ever know, the only time when they will be treated with something approaching maternal care. But even this is temporary. By the time a child reaches 5 years of age, the true education begins, and with it, any pretense of kindness is stripped away. The drill abbots who oversee the Schola Progenium are not teachers in any conventional sense. They are sculptors working with human clay, chiseling away everything weak, everything soft, everything human that might interfere with absolute devotion to duty. Many of these abbots are former Imperial Guard officers, men and women who have seen war firsthand and know exactly what kind of steel is needed to survive it. Others are members of the Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle, whose faith burns with an intensity that makes even the most hardened soldiers uncomfortable. These instructors know that the children before them will one day be asked to make decisions that could send thousands to their deaths. They know that hesitation, that mercy, that compassion could mean the difference between a battle won and a world lost to the enemies of mankind. The daily schedule in the Schola Progenium is designed to break down individual will and replace it with institutional obedience. The Progena wake before dawn, their sleep always just short of what the body needs, keeping them in a state of constant fatigue that makes resistance difficult. They dress in identical uniforms, eat identical rations, and march in perfect formations to their first lessons of the day. These lessons are not the mathematics and literature that children elsewhere might learn. Instead, they study the Imperial Creed, memorizing scripture and catechisms that teach them humanity's place in the galaxy. They learn that the Emperor is mankind's only hope, that xenos species seek humanity's destruction, that heresy is the greatest of all crimes, that personal desires mean nothing compared to the needs of the Imperium. Physical training follows, and this is where the weak are winnowed from the strong. The Samosaon. Progena run obstacle courses designed to push human endurance to its limits. They learn hand-to-hand combat, drilling with wooden weapons until their hands bleed and their muscles scream. They are taught to fire laser guns and autoguns, to field strip weapons in darkness, to maintain equipment that could mean the difference between life and death in combat. And through all of this, the drill abbots watch, taking careful note of which progena show aptitude for leadership, which ones can inspire others, which ones have the iron will necessary to make the hardest decisions. Discipline in the Schola Progenium is absolute, and the punishments for failure are severe. Sleep deprivation, physical labor to the point of collapse, public humiliation before one's peers. All of these are considered appropriate responses to minor infractions. For more serious violations, the punishments become harsher still. A progena who shows cowardice during training exercises might be branded, the mark of shame burned into their flesh as a permanent reminder. One who questions the teachings of the Imperial Creed might be subjected to days of forced prayer and recitation until the doubt is driven from their mind. The message is clear. Weakness is not tolerated. Questioning is not permitted, and only absolute obedience will be rewarded. But the Schola Progenium does not simply beat obedience into its students. It also cultivates a genuine faith, a real belief in the righteousness of the Imperium's cause. The progena attend daily services in the Scholars' Chapel, where they pray before statues of the Emperor and hear sermons about the nobility of sacrifice. They study the lives of imperial saints and heroes, learning about men and women who gave everything for mankind's survival. They are taught that their parents died as martyrs, that their deaths had meaning and purpose, that by following in their footsteps, the progena can honor that sacrifice. Over time, this constant reinforcement creates a worldview where service to the Imperium is not just a duty, but a sacred calling. As the progena grow older and their education progresses, they are gradually sorted according to their talents and aptitudes. Those who show exceptional physical prowess and discipline are earmarked for the Tempestus Scions, the elite special forces of the Imperial Guard. Young women who display fervent faith and martial skill are guided toward the Adepta Sororitas, where they might one day become Sisters of Battle. Those with sharp minds and investigative instincts draw the attention of the Inquisition's representatives, who occasionally visit the Schola to recruit potential acolytes. And then, there are those who possess a unique combination of charisma, unshakable resolve, and the ability to inspire others through fear as much as through courage. These progena are destined for the commissariat. The training of a cadet commissar is particularly rigorous. Unlike regular Imperial Guard officers who might spend years rising through the ranks, commissars must be able to step into any regiment, assume authority over officers who have served for decades, and command respect instantly. This requires not just tactical knowledge, but an understanding of human psychology, an ability to read when troops are on the edge of breaking, when an officer has lost the will to lead, when summary execution is the only option left to maintain discipline. Cadet commissars are sent into actual combat zones as part of their final training, attached to veteran commissars who teach them the brutal realities of their future role. They witness their mentors executing cowards, overriding the orders of incompetent officers, rallying broken units through sheer force of will. They learn that a commissar must be willing to pull the trigger without hesitation, that mercy is a luxury the Imperium cannot afford. The graduation from cadet to full commissar is not marked by ceremony or celebration. Instead, it comes when a supervising commissar decides that the cadet has proven themselves worthy, that they have demonstrated the necessary combination of skills and character. Some cadets are deemed unsuitable for the commissariat, but too skilled to waste. These might be transferred to stormtrooper units or given officer commissions in regular Imperial Guard regiments. Others fail more dramatically, showing cowardice or weakness at a critical moment. For these failures, there is only one fate. Their training is complete, but they will never leave the battlefield alive. A fellow cadet or the supervising commissar will administer the Emperor's justice, and the failed progener's name will be stricken from all records. For those who succeed, who earn the right to wear the black greatcoat and peaked cap, what follows is a career defined by isolation. A commissar is not part of the regiment they serve with. They stand outside the normal chain of command, reporting directly to the commissariat and ultimately to the officio prefectus itself. This independence is essential to their role, allowing them to execute even high-ranking officers without fear of military politics or retaliation. But it also means that a commissar is forever separate from those they serve alongside, forever the outsider, forever the figure that soldiers fear as much as they respect. The weapons that a commissar carries are as much symbols as they are tools of war. Every commissar is issued a bolt pistol, a weapon that stands in stark contrast to the standard issue las pistols carried by Imperial Guard officers. The bolt pistol is a weapon of the Adeptus Astartes, of the Space Marines, who are humanity's greatest warriors. For a normal human to wield such a weapon is a mark of status and authority that cannot be ignored. The bolt pistol fires mass reactive shells, miniature rockets that penetrate their target before detonating inside, reducing flesh and bone to an explosive spray of gore. When a commissar raises their bolt pistol, everyone on the battlefield knows what is about to happen. The weapon's distinctive report, a thunderous crack that echoes across the combat zone, is followed by a sight that burns itself into the memory of every witness. A soldier's head exploding in a shower of blood and brain matter, an officer crumpling to the ground, their chest cavity blown open by the explosive shell. These are not clean deaths, not quick or merciful. They are object lessons, demonstrations of what happens when the Imperium's standards are not met. The bolt pistol's magazine typically holds between 6 and 10 rounds, precious ammunition that must be used judiciously. Each shell weighs approximately 80 grams, the propellant and warhead combined into a package that measures .75 caliber, or just over 19 millimeters in diameter. This is significantly larger than the laser weapons favored by the Imperial Guard, and the physical impact of a bolt shell hitting its target is devastating even before the explosive payload detonates. Commissars become intimately familiar with their bolt pistols, learning to maintain the weapon's complex mechanisms, to diagnose and repair malfunctions in the field, to make every shot count when ammunition supplies are limited. Some commissars name their pistols, treating them as honored companions in decades of service. Others view them as nothing more than tools, implements to be used and replaced as necessary. Alongside the bolt pistol, every commissar carries a close combat weapon. Most favor the chainsword, a brutal weapon that combines a one-handed sword's reach with the industrial destructive power of a chainsaw. The chainsword's blade is lined with adamantium teeth that rotate at high speed, capable of chewing through armor and bone with equal ease. In close quarters combat, when the enemy breaches the Imperial lines and fighting becomes desperate and personal, the chainsword is the Commissar's answer. The weapon's signature whine, the high-pitched scream of teeth spinning at thousands of rotations per minute, is a sound that precedes death. Soldiers have described watching Commissars wade into melee combat, their chainswords carving through enemy ranks in sprays of blood and severed limbs, the black greatcoat becoming soaked in gore as the Commissar fights with a ferocity that matches any Space Marine. Some Commissars prefer power weapons over chainswords. A power sword, or power maul, generates a disruption field around its blade, allowing it to slice through even the heaviest armor with minimal resistance. These weapons are more expensive and require more maintenance than chainswords, but in the hands of a skilled warrior, they are devastatingly effective. The blue-white glow of an activated power weapon has become associated with Commissars who lead from the front, who stand at the spearhead of Imperial advances and personally engage the enemy's champions in single combat. There are stories of Commissars dueling with Chaos Space Marine champions, of power swords clashing against demonic blades, of ordinary humans standing against the galaxy's most terrible warriors through nothing but skill and determination. But the true weapon of a Commissar is not the bolt pistol or the chainsword. It is authority itself, the absolute power to determine who lives and who dies. This authority is enshrined in Imperial law and backed by the might of the Commissariat. A Commissar can execute any soldier under their purview, from the lowest conscript to the most decorated veteran. They can overrule the orders of regimental commanders, taking direct control of operations when they judge that the existing leadership is inadequate. They can condemn entire units to penal battalions or execution if those units are deemed to have failed in their duty. This power is not theoretical or ceremonial. It is real, immediate, and exercised regularly. The doctrine of summary execution is central to the Commissar's role. When Imperial Guard troops are pinned down by enemy fire, when they begin to waver, when the first whispers of retreat begin to spread through the ranks, the Commissar must act decisively. There is no time for courts-martial or formal proceedings. There is only the moment, the critical instant when discipline must be restored before it is too late. The Commissar identifies the source of the weakness, usually an officer or sergeant who has lost their nerve, and they execute them on the spot. The crack of the bolt pistol, the sight of a body hitting the ground, the Commissar's cold pronouncement that cowardice will not be tolerated, all of this combines to create a shock that ripples through the unit. Fear replaces panic. The troops remember that there are two ways to die today, at the hands of the enemy or at the hands of their own Commissar. Given that choice, most choose to fight. This practice of summary execution is controversial even within the Imperium. Some argue that it wastes valuable personnel, that killing experienced soldiers for momentary weakness is counterproductive. Others point out that overly harsh Commissars tend to die in friendly fire accidents, their troops arranging for a stray shot to find its way into the Commissar's back during the confusion of battle. The most successful Commissars understand that summary execution is a tool to be used sparingly, a last resort rather than a first response. They know that inspiring troops through example, through standing at the front and facing the same dangers as common soldiers, is often more effective than terror. But they also know that when inspiration fails, when courage wavers and the line begins to break, they must be willing to pull the trigger without hesitation or remorse. The Commissariat has produced legendary figures whose names are known across the Imperium, warriors whose deeds have passed into myth and whose examples are studied by every cadet Commissar. Three names stand. Above all others, three Commissars whose careers embody different aspects of their sacred duty. Sebastian Yarrick, the hero of Armageddon. Ibram Gaunt, the Ghostmaker. and Siafas Kane, whom history records as a hero, but who would insist he was nothing of the sort. Sebastian Yaric's story is one of unwavering determination in the face of overwhelming odds. Born on Taos 3 under the name Sebastian Varden, he was orphaned at age 7 and sent to the Schola Progenium. His early career saw him serve as an Imperial Guard stormtrooper before transferring to the Commissariat, where he apprenticed under Lord Commissar Rasp. Yaric was already old when the Second War for Armageddon began, scheduled to retire on the very day that the Orc warlord, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk, Thraka's massive invasion force, arrived at the world. But retirement would have to wait. Armageddon needed every skilled officer it could muster, and Yaric's expertise in combating Xenos threats made him invaluable. The siege of Hades Hive became the defining moment of Yaric's career. When the incompetent overlord Hermann von Straub banished Yaric to the Hive as punishment for circumventing his authority, von Straub believed he was sending the Commissar to his death. Instead, Yaric transformed Hades Hive into an unbreakable fortress. Under his command, the defenders held against waves of orc assaults that should have overwhelmed them within days. Yaric inspired his troops to feats of courage that defied belief. Not a single soldier was executed for cowardice during the entire siege, a remarkable achievement that speaks to Yaric's ability to motivate through leadership rather than fear. The moment that sealed Yaric's legend came during the height of the siege. Ghazghkull sent one of his most powerful war bosses, Ugulhard, to break through the Hive's defenses and kill Yaric personally. The massive orc and the elderly Commissar met in single combat, and Ugulhard's power claw severed Yaric's right arm at the elbow. Any normal man would have died from the shock and blood loss. Yaric, driven by sheer force of will, swung his chainsword with his remaining arm and beheaded the orc warboss. Then, as orcs and humans alike watched in stunned disbelief, Yaric picked up Ugulhard's power claw and brandished it above his head, holding the massive weapon as blood poured from his severed arm. The orcs broke and fled in terror. The Imperial defenders surged forward with renewed vigor, and only after the enemy had been routed did Yaric allow himself to lose consciousness. Yaric survived the war and had the power claw permanently attached to replace his lost arm. He also lost an eye in battle and had it replaced with a bionic implant capable of firing laser beams, deliberately playing into orc superstitions about his evil eye. These cybernetic enhancements, combined with his already formidable reputation, made Yaric a figure of terror to the orcs. They began to believe that the Aunkuktits, Commissar, could not be killed, that his evil eye could kill with a glance, that his power claw could crush anything. And in the strange way that orc psychic powers work, these beliefs made them at least partially true. Yaric became tougher, harder to kill, his legend sustaining him through battles that would have killed lesser men. When Ghazghkull returned for the Third War for Armageddon decades later, Yaric came out of retirement to face his old nemesis once more. The war raged for years, consuming millions of lives and devastating the planet. Yaric's strategic acumen and understanding of orc psychology allowed him to counter many of Ghazghkull's most devastating tactics. But eventually the orc warlord left Armageddon, drawn away by visions he believed were sent by his gods. Yaric, unwilling to let his greatest enemy escape to threaten other worlds, pursued Ghazghkull into the darkness between the stars. Their hunt continues to this day, a personal war between two warriors who have gained a strange mutual respect despite being mortal enemies. Yaric represents the Commissar as unstoppable force, as the warrior who simply refuses to die, who pushes forward through injuries that would kill anyone else, whose presence on the battlefield inspires soldiers to believe that victory is possible against any odds. His example teaches that a Commissar must be willing to sacrifice everything, including their own body, to fulfill their duty. But Yaric also demonstrates that terror alone is not enough. His troops followed him not because they feared execution, but because they believed in him, because they had seen him stand at the front of every charge. Because they knew he would never ask them to face dangers he was unwilling to face himself. Ibram Gaunt's story is different, a tale of a commissar forced to become something more. Gaunt earned his rank during the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, a massive imperial campaign to reclaim a region of space from the forces of chaos. His mentor, Warmaster Slado, died at the moment of final victory on the planet Balho, and with his dying breath appointed Gaunt as Colonel Commissar of the Tanith 1st and Only Regiment. This dual role, part commissar and part regimental commander, is extremely rare and considered deeply problematic by the commissariat. How can a commissar maintain discipline and execute officers for incompetence when they are themselves the commanding officer? How can they remain outside the normal chain of command when they are responsible for the regiment's tactical decisions? Gaunt took command of the Tanith 1st and Only, just as their homeworld was destroyed by chaos forces. The regiment became the last survivors of their people, a fact that shaped their identity and made them fiercely loyal to Gaunt despite his commissar status. Over the course of the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, Gaunt led his ghosts, as they came to be known, through countless battles and impossible missions. He earned a reputation as a tactical genius, but also as a commissar who cared about his men in ways that were almost unheard of in the Imperial Guard. Gaunt's philosophy differed from the standard commissar doctrine. He believed in leading by example rather than through fear. He fought at the front of every engagement, his power sword and bolt pistol dealing death to the Emperor's enemies, while his troops took courage from his presence. He mourned the dead rather than dismissing casualties as acceptable losses. He famously said that the dead would always haunt those who survived, and that soldiers should strive to ensure the dead became friendly ghosts rather than accusatory specters. This compassionate approach made him beloved by his troops, but viewed with suspicion by the wider commissariat, who worried that Gaunt was too soft, too willing to compromise the harsh discipline that kept the Imperial Guard functional. But Gaunt was also willing to make the hardest decisions when necessary. He executed officers who had failed in their duty, including commissars who he judged were abusing their authority. He reported Commissar Pius Cowler for having 2 soldiers flogged to death over minor infractions, an action that earned him Cowley's undying hatred, but demonstrated that Gaunt believed commissars should enforce discipline proportionally rather than through excessive cruelty. When the situation demanded it, Gaunt could be as ruthless as any other commissar, but he never forgot that every soldier under his command was a human being with hopes and fears and families they had left behind. The Ghost's missions took them deep into enemy territory, often operating behind chaos lines for months at a time. They became specialists in reconnaissance and sabotage, striking at critical targets and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Gaunt's leadership style, emphasizing flexibility and initiative rather than rigid adherence to doctrine, proved perfect for this kind of warfare. His men trusted him to make the right calls in situations where standard Imperial Guard tactics would have gotten them all killed. And in return, Gaunt trusted his veterans to use their judgment and skills rather than simply following orders by rote. Gaunt represents the commissar as leader, as the figure who transcends the traditional role and becomes something more than an enforcer of discipline. His example shows that commissars can inspire genuine loyalty and devotion rather than just fear, that they can adapt their methods to fit their regiment's needs rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all approach to discipline. But Gaunt also demonstrates the tensions inherent in trying to be both commissar and commander, the difficulty of maintaining necessary distance while also caring deeply about the welfare of one's troops. His story is one of constant struggle to balance these competing demands, to be the leader his ghosts need, while also fulfilling his duties as a commissar. And then, there is Caiaphas Cain, the commissar whose private journals reveal a very different man from the hero celebrated in official imperial histories. If Yarrick represents the unstoppable force and Gaunt represents the compassionate leader, then Cain represents something that should not exist within the commissariat at all. The reluctant hero, the self-interested survivor, the man who desperately wants to avoid danger but whose attempts to find safety consistently lead him into the most perilous situations imaginable. According to his own memoirs, edited and published after his death by Inquisitor Amberley Vale, Cain spent his entire career trying to avoid combat. He cultivated his heroic reputation deliberately, understanding that being seen as brave and competent would get him assigned to safer positions away from the front lines. But fate, or perhaps the Emperor's sense of humor, had other plans. Every attempt to secure a comfortable posting backfired spectacularly. Trying to hide in a supply depot put him in the path of a Tyranid invasion. Accepting what seemed like a cushy assignment to a peaceful world landed him in the middle of a Genestealer cult uprising. Even his aide Jürgen, a man whose personal hygiene was so atrocious that he cleared rooms simply by entering them, turned out to be a blank, a rare human whose presence disrupts psychic powers, which meant Cain repeatedly found himself forced into confrontations with psykers and demons. Despite his claims of cowardice, Cain's actions spoke differently. He saved countless lives through quick thinking and tactical brilliance. He fought Chaos Space Marines in close combat and survived. He negotiated with orcs, dealt with Necrons, outwitted Dark Elder, and faced down Tyranid swarms. His troops adored him, not because they feared him, but because he treated them with respect and fought alongside them, rather than ordering them forward from the rear. Other commissars were known to die in friendly fire incidents when their troops decided they were too harsh. Cain was beloved by his regiments to the point where veterans would volunteer for suicide missions, simply because Cain would be there. The truth, as Inquisitor Vale suggests in her editorial notes, is that Cain was far braver than he gave himself credit for. A truly self-interested coward would not have repeatedly thrown himself into desperate situations to save his troops. A purely pragmatic survivor would not have risked his life to protect civilians or defend allies. What Cain possessed was not cowardice, but an acute awareness of danger, combined with a deeply human fear of death. Unlike commissars who had been conditioned by the Schola Progenium to view death as simply another form of service, Cain wanted to live. But when the choice came down to saving himself or doing what was right, he always, despite his protests, did what was right. Cain's example is important because it demonstrates that commissars, despite their training, remain human. They feel fear. They have desires beyond pure service to the Emperor. They can question and doubt while still fulfilling their duties. And sometimes, that humanity, that imperfection, makes them more effective than the coldly perfect enforcers the Commissariat tries to create. Soldiers followed Cain not because his reputation was fake, but because it was real in the ways that mattered. He genuinely cared about them surviving. He used his tactical skills to minimize casualties rather than treating losses as acceptable. He earned respect through actions rather than through terror. These three commissars, Yarrick, Gaunt, and Cain, represent the full spectrum of what the Commissariat can produce. They show that there is no single correct way to be a commissar, that the role has room for different approaches and philosophies, but they all share certain fundamental traits. They all place duty above personal safety. They all made impossible decisions that sent soldiers to their deaths. They all understood that sometimes the only way to save thousands is to sacrifice hundreds. And they all, in their final moments or in their darkest hours, would be called upon to give that final order, the command that would define everything they had been and everything they believed. The daily life of a commissar is defined by constant vigilance and the weight of authority that never lifts. From the moment they wake until they finally sleep, often in conditions that would shock civilians, commissars must maintain the iron discipline that keeps Imperial Guard regiments functional. They inspect troops, searching for signs of weakness or wavering faith. They observe officers, evaluating whether commanders are competent and committed or whether they need to be replaced, either through official reassignment or through the more permanent solution of summary execution. They deliver speeches and sermons, reminding soldiers why they fight and what will happen if they fail. They lead prayer services, invoking the Emperor's name and blessing troops, before they march into battle. They stand at the front of charges, proving that they will not ask others to face dangers they themselves avoid. This constant presence is exhausting, both physically and psychologically. Commissars are expected to be always on duty, always vigilant, always ready to enforce discipline. They cannot show weakness or uncertainty. They cannot admit to fear or doubt. They must project absolute confidence even when surrounded by horrors that would break normal minds. The mortality rate among commissars is high, not just from enemy action, but from the simple stress of maintaining such rigid standards over years or decades of service. Many commissars die not from lasfire or chainsword wounds, but from heart attacks, strokes, or other stress-related conditions brought on by the unrelenting pressure of their role. The relationship between a commissar and their regiment is complex and often contradictory. Soldiers know that the commissar has the power to execute them for the slightest sign of cowardice or incompetence. This creates a baseline of fear that never entirely goes away. But soldiers also know that commissars are supposed to lead by example, to stand at the front and face the same dangers as everyone else. A commissar who hides in the rear while ordering troops forward will quickly lose respect and authority. Worse, they may find themselves the victim of an unfortunate accident when the shooting starts. The smart commissar understands this dynamic and works to balance fear with respect, to be both the executioner who will not tolerate failure and the warrior who faces death alongside their troops. Officers have an even more complicated relationship with their attached commissars. In theory, the commissar is not part of the chain of command, serving instead as an advisor and overseer who ensures that orders are carried out properly. In practice, commissars have the authority to overrule any officer up to and including the regimental commander. This creates natural tension, as experienced officers often resent having a political officer second-guessing their tactical decisions. The best commissars navigate this tension by recognizing that they are not military geniuses, that the officers have expertise in commanding their specific regiments that commissars lack. They save their interventions for moments when morale is truly failing, or when officers are clearly making decisions based on cowardice rather than tactical judgment. But some commissars wield their authority like a club, overriding orders for minor reasons and executing officers who question them. These commissars rarely live long. Either their poor tactical decisions lead them into situations where they die alongside the troops they have mismanaged, or they discover that experienced officers have ways of arranging accidents for commissars who are more trouble than they are worth. The commissariat officially denies that such incidents occur, but every commissar learns the stories, the cautionary tales of political officers who pushed too hard and ended up with a last round in their back, or who walked into ambushes that their own troops could have warned them about. When battle is joined, the commissar's role transforms. No longer are they the inspector or overseer. Now they become the living embodiment of imperial authority on the battlefield, the figure that soldiers look to when everything goes wrong. Enemy artillery is raining down. Heavy weapons are cutting through ranks. The soldier next to you just had his head vaporized by a lascannon. The instinct to run, to seek cover, to flee from this mechanized slaughter is overwhelming. And that is when the commissar steps forward. The commissar does not take cover. They stand exposed, bolt pistol raised, greatcoat billowing in the smoke-filled wind. They bellow orders that somehow cut through the chaos, telling soldiers where to aim, which position to hold, which direction to advance. Their presence creates a bubble of order in the midst of chaos. If the commissar is still standing, still fighting, still projecting absolute confidence that victory is achievable, then maybe the situation is not as hopeless as it seems. Maybe there is still a chance to win this fight. Maybe running is not the only option. But sometimes the situation truly is hopeless. Sometimes the enemy is too numerous, too powerful, too well entrenched. Sometimes retreat is the only sensible option, the only way to preserve forces for future battles. And that is when the Commissar must make their hardest decision. Do they authorize withdrawal, potentially starting a rout that spreads to other units and turns an orderly retreat into a massacre? Or do they order the line to hold, knowing that doing so condemns every soldier present to death, but buys time for other Imperial forces to regroup or escape? The doctrine is clear. When retreat is authorized by higher command, when falling back is part of a larger tactical plan, then withdrawal is acceptable, and any soldier who panics and runs early can be executed for cowardice. But when retreat is not authorized, when the orders are to hold the line at all costs, then the Commissar must ensure that those orders are obeyed. Even if it means standing on a collapsing position and shooting soldiers who try to flee, even if it means dying alongside troops who have been ordered to fight to the last man, even if the strategic value of holding that position seems questionable and the waste of lives seems criminal. This is where many commissars earn their final honors or die forgotten. The ones who stand and fight, who rally troops for one last desperate charge or one final defensive stand, become legends. Their names are recorded in regimental histories. Their deeds are commemorated in monuments and memorials. But the commissars who calculate wrongly, who order stands that serve no purpose, who execute soldiers for cowardice, when retreat was actually the correct tactical choice, those commissars are remembered differently if they are remembered at all. Their names might be quietly struck from records. Their deaths might be attributed to enemy action when really they were killed by their own troops who decided the commissar had gone too far. The battlefields of the 41st millennium have witnessed countless last stands, desperate defenses where Imperial forces held against impossible odds, not because they had any hope of victory, but because holding that position served some larger strategic purpose. These last stands have certain common elements. They always involve a position that must be held, a choke point or defensive line that the enemy must pass through to reach a more important objective. They always involve forces that are insufficient for the task, outnumbered and outgunned, but ordered to stand anyway. And they almost always involve a commissar who must transform that hopeless situation into something that at least slows the enemy down. Picture a trench line on some nameless world, carved through mud that has been churned by artillery for so long that it has the consistency of bloody porridge. The Imperial Guard regiment holding this line has been here for weeks, watching the enemy build up forces across no man's land, knowing that when the attack comes, it will be overwhelming. The regimental commander has requested permission to withdraw to better defensive positions. The request has been denied. High Command needs 3 more days for evacuations to complete at the spaceport, 50 kilometers behind the lines. This regiment will buy those 3 days with their lives. The commissar walks the trench line in the hours before the attack begins. The soldiers are veterans by now, the survivors of months of grinding warfare. They know what is coming. They can see the enemy massing, can hear the rumble of their engines, can feel the ground shake as their artillery pieces are moved into position. The men are not panicking, not yet, but there is a hollowness in their eyes, the look of people who have accepted that they will die, but are trying to come to terms with what that means. The commissar speaks to them, not in thundering proclamations, but in quieter words meant for individual soldiers. She reminds them that their families were evacuated last week, that every hour this line holds is another hour for civilians to reach the transport ships. She points out that they have survived this long by being smart and brave and working together. She tells them the Emperor watches over faithful soldiers, and that dying in his service earns rewards beyond mortal understanding. Some of the soldiers seem comforted by these words. Others just nod, appreciating the gesture, even if they do not fully believe it. What matters is that someone is still in command, someone still cares, someone will be here with them at the end. When the bombardment begins, it is even worse than expected. The enemy has brought heavy artillery, the kind that fires shells the size of ground cars. Each impact sends geysers of mud and body parts flying into the air. Trenches collapse, burying soldiers alive. The noise is beyond deafening, a continuous roar that makes thought impossible. Soldiers hug the trench walls, knowing that even their flak armor offers no protection against direct hits from weapons of this size. They just have to hope they are not the ones randomly selected for death by the mathematical probabilities of artillery scatter patterns. The bombardment lasts for an hour. When it finally stops, the sudden silence is almost as disorienting as the noise had been. Ears ringing, covered in mud and blood, the survivors pull themselves up to the firing positions and see the enemy advancing. There are thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, a tide of infantry supported by armored vehicles and walking war machines. The Imperial line, already depleted by the bombardment, faces an enemy that outnumbers them at least 5 to 1. The Commissar fires her bolt pistol into the air, the crack of the weapon cutting through the ringing silence. Her voice rises in a parade ground bellow that soldiers 200 meters away can hear clearly. First rank, fire! Second rank, fire! Third rank, fire! The old infantry drill, designed to produce continuous volleys from massed ranks of laser guns. The Imperial line erupts in synchronized pulses of laser fire. The enemy advance staggers as hundreds of their troops fall. But there are too many of them. They keep coming, stepping over the bodies of the fallen without breaking stride. The Commissar does not stop shouting orders. She directs fire toward priority targets, toward the heavy weapons teams and the armored vehicles rather than wasting shots on individual infantry. She calls out encouragement, praising soldiers who make particularly good shots, noting when enemies fall back from concentrated fire on their position. She maintains the rhythm of fire, keeping the troops focused on their task, rather than on the overwhelming number of enemies bearing down on them. As long as she is standing there, as long as her voice rises above the chaos, the soldiers keep fighting. The enemy reaches the wire, the barrier of razor mesh and mines that marks the final defensive line. Explosions rip through their ranks as mines detonate. Soldiers are caught on the wire, screaming as they try to free themselves while lasfire cuts them down. But the enemy has factored this into their calculations. They pile bodies onto the wire, using their own dead as bridges, and continue advancing. Hand-to-hand fighting breaks out along the trench line. The enemy drops into the Imperial positions, and suddenly, warfare becomes personal and brutal. The Commissar draws her chainsword, the weapon screaming to life as she cuts down an enemy soldier who had leaped into the trench beside her. Another enemy appears, and she fires her bolt pistol point blank, the explosive shell removing the target's torso in a spray of gore. She is not alone in this. All along the trench line, Imperial soldiers are fighting with bayonets and entrenching tools and bare hands, grappling with enemies in the mud while artillery shells continue to fall around them. Hours pass, though time becomes meaningless in the chaos. The enemy captures sections of the trench, and the remaining defenders fall back to secondary positions. The line contracts, shrinking as more soldiers die, and the perimeter becomes smaller. The Commissar is everywhere, appearing at crisis points, rallying soldiers for counterattacks, personally killing enemy soldiers who seem about to break through. Her greatcoat is shredded by shrapnel and soaked with blood, both her own and others. She has lost her peaked cap somewhere in the fighting, but her authority is no less for its absence. Finally, as the sun begins to set on the third day of continuous combat, a Vox transmission crackles through the surviving communication equipment. The evacuation is complete. All civilians and non-essential personnel have been loaded onto transport ships. The fleet is preparing to depart. The defense of this position is no longer required. The survivors are authorized to withdraw. The Commissar gathers the remnants of the regiment, perhaps 200 soldiers from the original 5,000 who held this position. They are exhausted, moving in a daze, barely able to process that they have permission to leave. She organizes them into a fighting withdrawal, establishing a rearguard to cover the retreat, while the bulk of the survivors fall back toward extraction points. She places herself with the rearguard, of course. That is where a Commissar belongs, at the point of greatest danger, ensuring that the retreat does not turn into a rout. They do not all make it out. The rearguard is overrun in the final moments. dying so that others can reach the extraction point. But because of their sacrifice, because 100 soldiers held for those last critical minutes, the remaining troops reach safety. They board shuttles that lift them away from that hell, leaving behind trenches filled with dead and a smoking wasteland that speaks to the terrible price of imperial victory. This is the Commissar's final order in its most literal sense. Hold this position. Buy time with your lives. Stand and fight when every instinct screams to run. The Commissar who gives such orders must be willing to follow them, must be prepared to die alongside the soldiers they have commanded. Many do die, their bodies found among the casualties when recovery teams finally reach the battlefield. Others survive, bearing wounds both physical and psychological that will mark them for the rest of their lives. But these are not the only kind of final orders that commissars give. Sometimes the final order is not to hold, but to advance, to charge forward, when doing so means certain death, but when that charge might accomplish something vital. Picture a different battlefield, an urban environment where Imperial forces are trying to break through enemy fortifications. The enemy holds a strong point, a building that commands the surrounding streets, with overlapping fields of fire. Every approach is covered. The Imperial forces have tried artillery bombardment, but the building's construction is too solid. They have tried infiltration, but the enemy's defenses are too thorough. The only option left is a direct assault, sending soldiers charging across open ground into withering fire in the hope that enough survive to reach the building and take it from the inside. The regimental commander looks at the tactical situation and knows that ordering this assault will kill most of the attacking force. Perhaps half the soldiers will die in the first 30 seconds. 3/4 will be casualties before anyone reaches the building, and even if they get inside, the fighting will be brutal and close quarters, with no guarantee of success. The commander hesitates, looking for alternatives, unwilling to give an order that will slaughter so many of his troops. The commissar does not hesitate. He sees that the strategic situation demands this sacrifice. If the strong point is not taken, the entire offensive will stall. If the offensive stalls, enemy reinforcements will arrive and turn victory into defeat. The tactical calculus is clear, even if the human cost is terrible. The commissar steps forward and gives the order himself. Fix bayonets. Prepare to charge. The soldiers know what this means. There is a moment of shocked silence as they process what they have just been told to do. Then, one soldier, perhaps driven by faith or loyalty, or simply the knowledge that questioning the order will result in immediate execution, begins affixing his bayonet to his lasgun. The action spreads, a ripple of reluctant obedience moving through the ranks. Soldiers check their weapons one last time, settle their helmets more firmly on their heads, whisper prayers or curse words, or simply stand silent, gathering their courage for what is to come. The commissar stands at the front of the formation, bolt pistol in one hand, chainsword in the other. He does not give a long speech. There is nothing to say that will make this easier. Instead, he simply raises his chainsword and bellows a single word: "Charge!" He runs forward, and the soldiers follow because a commissar is leading the charge, because someone has decided this is necessary, because following might kill you, but refusing will definitely kill you. They sprint across the open ground, las fire cutting through their ranks like a scythe through wheat. Men fall screaming, their bodies adding to the obstacle course of rubble and wreckage that litters the battlefield. The survivors keep running, knowing that stopping means dying, that the only chance is to reach the building and get inside where the enemy's heavy weapons cannot track them. The commissar reaches the building first, smashing through a barricaded door with his chainsword and diving into the interior. Enemy soldiers open fire from defensive positions, but they are not prepared for the sheer ferocity of the Imperial assault. The commissar kills 3 enemies in the first seconds, his bolt pistol and chainsword working in perfect coordination. More Imperial soldiers pour through the breach, firing at point-blank range, using grenades to clear rooms, fighting with a desperation born from knowing they have nowhere to retreat to. The battle for the building lasts 20 minutes. When it is over, the strongpoint has been taken. The strategic objective has been achieved. the offensive can continue. But of the 300 soldiers who charged across that open ground, only 86 survived to report success. The commissar is among the casualties, his body found in a third-floor room where he had personally dueled with the enemy commander. Both men died in that confrontation, locked in combat that neither could win but neither could abandon. This too is a final order, not given from safety but from the front of the charge, bought with the commissar's own life as proof that he would not ask others to make sacrifices he was unwilling to make himself. These commissars are remembered more fondly than those who order charges from the rear. They earn genuine respect rather than just fear, and their deaths are mourned rather than secretly celebrated. There are also the final orders given in strange circumstances, when the commissar must decide between competing duties, between following regulation and doing what is right, between the letter of imperial law and its spirit. The death course of Krieg presents a unique challenge for commissars. These soldiers come from a world that has spent 500 years as a radioactive wasteland, a monument to civil war and the use of weapons that should never have been deployed. The Krieg culture is one of absolute devotion to duty through death, of viewing survival as an unfortunate failure to serve the emperor properly. They are fanatically loyal and will hold positions long past the point where retreat would be sensible. They are also utterly fearless, charging into situations that would make normal soldiers hesitate. For most regiments, a commissar's job is to prevent cowardice and enforce discipline. For the death cause, a commissar's job is to prevent suicidal bravery and enforce some measure of tactical sense. A Krieg officer who sees a heavily fortified enemy position will immediately begin planning a frontal assault, calculating acceptable casualty rates of 80 or 90% if the position is taken. The commissar must step in and explain that throwing away the entire regiment to take one position is not tactically sound, that sometimes it is better to bypass strong points or wait for artillery support rather than sacrificing thousands of lives in a direct assault. This reversal of the traditional commissar role creates its own tensions. The Krieg soldiers view the commissar not as an enforcer of discipline, but as the one person who might order them to stop fighting, to withdraw, to survive, when they would prefer to die gloriously in the emperor's service. Some commissars assigned to death corps regiments struggle with this dynamic. They were trained to inspire courage, not to restrain it. They were taught to shoot cowards, not to argue with officers who are too brave for their own good. The final orders given by commissars serving with the death corps often involve not hold the line or charge, but fall back or preserve the regiment. These orders are given reluctantly, knowing that the Krieg soldiers will obey, but will view the order as a failure, as depriving them of the chance to die properly. The commissar must balance the regiment's effectiveness as a military unit against their cultural need to atone for their ancestors' sins through death in battle. It is a thankless task, and commissars assigned to the death cause rarely remain with the regiment for long, either requesting transfer or dying from the stress of trying to manage soldiers who are simultaneously the most disciplined and the most suicidally reckless in the Imperial Guard. Throughout all of these scenarios, whether ordering last stands or desperate charges, whether restraining death cause fanaticism or executing wavering conscripts, the commissar must maintain their composure. They cannot show doubt or fear or uncertainty. They must project absolute confidence that their orders are correct, that the emperor's will is being served, that every sacrifice has meaning and purpose. This psychological burden is immense. Many commissars turn to various coping mechanisms. Some become genuinely faithful, developing a sincere belief in the imperial creed that sustains them through the horrors they witness and the orders they must give. Others become cold and mechanical, performing their duties with efficient brutality, but maintaining emotional distance from the consequences. A few break entirely, either quietly arranging their own deaths in battle or suffering psychological collapse that ends their careers. The relationship between commissars and the troops they serve with is further complicated by the fact that commissars can form genuine friendships with soldiers, even though doctrine suggests they should maintain professional distance. A commissar who serves with the same regiment for years comes to know individual soldiers, learns their quirks and personalities, understands which ones are reliable in a crisis and which need extra supervision. When that commissar must then order those soldiers to their deaths or execute one for cowardice, the emotional toll is significant. Some commissars handle this by avoiding personal connections, treating all soldiers as interchangeable assets rather than as individuals. Others embrace the relationships but accept the pain that comes with them, recognizing that caring about the troops actually makes them better commissars, even if it hurts more when orders demand sacrifice. The most successful commissars, the ones who survive multiple campaigns and earn genuine respect rather than just fear, tend to be those who can balance multiple competing demands. They enforce discipline strictly, but not cruelly. They lead by example, but recognize their tactical limitations. They inspire courage through their presence, but are willing to authorize retreat when necessary. They maintain emotional distance, but do not become entirely cold and mechanical. They follow doctrine, but can recognize when circumstances demand deviation from standard procedures. This balancing act is incredibly difficult, and most commissars lean too far in one direction or another. Those who lean too far toward harsh discipline often die in friendly fire incidents. Those who lean too far toward compassion are recalled by the commissariat for retraining or reassignment. The ones who find the balance become legends. As the centuries of the 41st millennium grind forward, as wars consume worlds and billions die in service to the Imperium, the commissar's role remains as vital as ever. The threats facing humanity show no sign of diminishing. Chaos cults continue to spring up on supposedly loyal worlds. Orc wars rage across entire sectors. Tyrannid hive fleets approach from beyond the galaxy's edge. Necrons awaken in tomb worlds scattered throughout Imperial space. The forces of the Tau Empire expand their influence, offering humans a place in their greater good and tempting them away from service to the Emperor. Against all of these threats, the Imperial Guard stands as humanity's primary defense, and commissars remain the glue that holds the Guard together. In recent conflicts, the role of commissars has evolved somewhat. The return of Reboot Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines Legion, has brought significant changes to how the Imperium wages war. Guilliman's tactical acumen and his willingness to implement reforms have led to some experimentation with commissar doctrine. Some regiments have seen commissars given more explicit command authority, formally integrating them into the chain of command rather than leaving them as outside observers. Other regiments have reduced the frequency of summary executions, implementing formal disciplinary procedures that still allow for battlefield executions, but require more justification and documentation. These reforms are controversial within the commissariat. Older commissars trained under the traditional system view them as dangerous concessions to weakness, arguing that the Imperial Guard's effectiveness depends on absolute discipline maintained through absolute authority. Younger commissars, particularly those who have served under officers influenced by Guilliman's reforms, suggest that the old ways wasted valuable personnel and created unnecessary friction between commissars and regimental commanders. The debate continues, with different sectors and different crusades implementing different policies based on local circumstances and the preferences of senior command. But regardless of these debates and reforms, certain fundamental truths remain unchanged. Commissars are still the ones who must stand at the critical point and make the hard decisions. They are still the ones who must look soldiers in the eye and order them to advance when doing so means death. They are still the ones who must execute their comrades for cowardice or incompetence. They are still the ones who must be willing to die to prove that their orders are not just empty words. The methods may evolve, the specific procedures may change, but the essential nature of the role remains constant. As we have explored the commissars, Final order in all its forms, we return to where we began, to that figure in the black greatcoat with the peaked cap, standing on a battlefield where victory seems impossible and defeat unthinkable. The Commissar knows that this may be their last order, that they may not survive the next few hours, that everything they are and have been may soon be reduced to a name in a casualty report. But they stand anyway. They raise their voice above the chaos. They give the order that needs to be given, regardless of personal cost. Hold this line. Advance through that fire. Stand when every instinct says run. The final order is not just words. It is a commitment, a promise that the Commissar will see it through to the end, whatever that end may be. It is a demonstration of faith, not just in the Emperor, but in the soldiers being ordered to do the impossible. It is an acknowledgement that some things matter more than survival, that duty transcends self-preservation, that the Imperium's survival depends on individuals willing to sacrifice everything when necessity demands it. The peaked cap may fall. The greatcoat may be torn by enemy fire. The bolt pistol may run empty, and the chainsword may be struck from dying hands. But the order remains, echoing across the battlefield, carried forward by those who heard it and chose to obey. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, the Commissar's final order is both tragedy and necessity, both horror and inspiration, both death sentence and sacred duty. And when historians write about the battles of the 41st millennium, when they catalogue the campaigns and count the casualties and analyze the strategic implications, they will note in passing that a Commissar was present, that a figure in black stood at the critical moment and gave the order that turned the tide, or bought precious time, or simply ensured that humanity's soldiers died with purpose rather than in panicked flight. The Commissar's name might be remembered, or it might be forgotten. Their deeds might be celebrated or recorded as statistics. But the role they played, the final order they gave, will remain part of the Imperium's endless war. The black coat and the peaked cap endure. New Commissars graduate from the Schola Progenium, ready to take up the burden that their predecessors laid down. They march out to join regiments on distant worlds, carrying bolt pistols and chainswords, prepared to enforce the Emperor's will through whatever means prove necessary. Some will die in their first engagement, cut down by enemy fire before they can prove themselves. Others will serve for decades, becoming legends in their own right, their names spoken with the same reverence given to Yarick and Gaunt. All of them will face the moment when they must give that final order, when everything comes down to their voice, their authority, their willingness to stand and be counted when it matters most. This is the Commissar's final order, not a single command given at the end of a career, but the recurring choice made every time the situation becomes desperate, every time duty demands sacrifice, every time human weakness threatens to compromise the mission. It is the order that defines the role, that separates Commissars from ordinary officers, that makes them both necessary and terrible. In a galaxy where humanity fights for survival against impossible odds, where entire worlds can be lost in a day and billions of lives measured as acceptable casualties, the Commissar stands as the embodiment of imperial resolve. When the Commissar gives that final order, they are not just commanding soldiers, they are speaking for terror itself, for the throne room where the Emperor endures his endless vigil, for the idea that humanity's survival is worth any price and any sacrifice. The war continues. It will always continue. There will always be another battle, another crisis, another moment when a Commissar must step forward and give an order that will send soldiers to their deaths. There will always be another peaked cap rising above the trenches, another black greatcoat visible through the smoke, another bolt pistol raised in judgment or defiance. The individuals change, but the role persists, as permanent a feature of imperial warfare as the laser gun and the prayer to the Emperor. And as long as the Imperium endures, as long as humanity fights against the darkness, there will be commissars giving final orders, standing at the breach, maintaining discipline through their presence and their authority and their willingness to die for what they believe. If you found this exploration of the commissar's role in Warhammer 40k enlightening, please like this video and subscribe to Stories of Hammer for more deep dives into the lore of the 41st millennium. We examine the aspects of Warhammer 40k that make this universe so compelling, from the grand strategies of crusades to the intimate moments of individual sacrifice. The galaxy is vast and filled with countless stories. Join us as we continue exploring the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, and where heroes are measured not by their survival, but by their willingness to stand when standing means death. Until next time, the Emperor protects. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But even in that endless night, there are stories that stand apart, tales of loss and vengeance that echo across 10,000 years. Among these legends, few are as compelling or as tragic as the story of Corvus Corax, the Raven Lord, Primarch of the 19th Legion, Master of Shadows and Architect of Liberation. For over 10 millennia, the Imperium has believed their Lord of Stealth to be lost, consumed by guilt and rage after witnessing the near annihilation of his beloved Raven Guard. But recent revelations have shattered that assumption. Corvus Corax is not dead. He is not lost. He is hunting in the darkness, transformed by the warp into something that exists between demon and Primarch, between vengeance and justice. And the question that now haunts the minds of Imperial strategists and Chaos warlords alike is simple. What happens when the Raven Lord returns from his long exile? The liberation of Lycaeus, origins of a revolutionary. To understand what Corvus Corax's return would mean, we must first understand who he was before his transformation. Unlike many of his brother Primarchs who landed on worlds of relative civilization, or at least established power structures, Corax arrived on Lycaeus, a lightless moon orbiting the forge world of Kievar. This was no world of kings or nobles waiting to shape a godling into their image. Lycaeus was a prison moon, a place where millions toiled in absolute darkness, mining resources for the factories of Kievar, while brutal overseers ensured maximum productivity through fear and violence. The infant Primarch was discovered by prisoners deep in the black mines, his gestation pod having crashed through layers of ice and stone to rest in a cavern far from the eyes of their captors. The workers who found him recognized something special in the pale child, with eyes like chips of solid shadow. They named him Corvus, meaning raven in their tongue, for like that dark bird, he seemed to be an omen of change. They kept him hidden from the guards, raising him in secret, teaching him everything they knew about resistance, warfare, and the price of freedom. Corax matured with frightening speed, as all Primarchs did, but his education was unique among his brothers. While Reboot Gilliman learned statecraft in Macragge's halls of power, while Lionel Johnson hunted beasts in Caliban's forests, Corvus Corax was learning the art of revolution from the bottom up. He studied not how to rule, but how to overthrow rulers. He learned not the tactics of open warfare between armies, but the principles of insurgency, sabotage, and asymmetric conflict. The workers of Lycaeus taught him that power came not from divine right or superior force alone, but from the will of the people united in common cause. As Corax grew, so did his understanding of the injustice that surrounded him. The mining operations of Lycaeus existed solely to feed the forges of Kievar, where wealthy tech guilds grew fat on the labor of millions, while those millions lived and died in darkness. The overseers were cruel not out of mere sadism, though many possessed that trait, but because the system required cruelty to function. Workers who fell behind in their quotas were beaten. Those who complained disappeared. Families were kept together only as long as they remained productive. It was a system designed to extract every ounce of value from human beings before discarding them like used equipment. Corax could not accept this. Where some might have used their superhuman abilities to escape or to carve out a position of privilege for themselves, the young Primarch chose a different path. He organized. He taught the workers to fight as units rather than individuals. He showed them how to strike at the system's weak points, how to turn the very infrastructure of oppression against itself. Under his guidance, what had been a scattered collection of downtrodden laborers became a disciplined, revolutionary force. The rebellion, when it came, was a masterpiece of planning and execution. Corax did not simply lead a slave revolt. He orchestrated a complete overthrow of the existing power structure, striking simultaneously at key facilities across Lycaeus, while ensuring minimal casualties among the workers themselves. He understood that victory meant nothing if the people he freed were destroyed in the process of liberation. Guard posts fell to coordinated attacks. Communications were severed, supply lines were cut. Within days, Lycaeus was free from its oppressors. But Corax understood that freedom on the moon meant nothing if Kiavar could simply reassert control. The tech guilds of the Forge world possessed immense military resources, and they would not accept the loss of their mining operations without retaliation. So Corax took the fight to them, using captured shuttles to deliver atomic mining charges to 5 major cities on Kiavar itself. It was a brutal decision, one that cost thousands of lives, but it broke the back of tech guild power and forced them to negotiate. The shadow of those mushroom clouds would haunt Corax for the rest of his existence, a reminder that even righteous causes could demand terrible prices. In the aftermath of liberation, Lycaeus was renamed Deliverance, a symbol of freedom won through sacrifice and determination. The moon's new government was built on principles of equality and mutual support, a stark contrast to the exploitation that had defined it before. Corax, who had no desire for personal power beyond what was needed to protect his people, became their leader not through conquest, but through earned respect. He was the deliverer, the one who had shown them they could break their chains. It was into this environment that the Emperor of Mankind arrived. When the Master of Humanity descended to Deliverance, he found not a savage warlord or a feudal king, but a revolutionary who had already united his world under principles of justice and shared purpose. The meeting between father and son is said to have lasted a day and a night, and while no record exists of their conversation, we know that Corax agreed to join the Great Crusade on one condition: that the Imperium would help complete the liberation of Kiavar, ensuring that the old systems of exploitation could never return. This origin story is crucial to understanding Corvus Corax because it defined everything he would become. He was not like Horus, bred for glory and acclaim. He was not like Perturabo, hungry for recognition and resentful of being overlooked. Corax cared nothing for personal glory. He cared about results, about actually making the galaxy better for the people who lived in it. He saw the Great Crusade not as a chance for conquest, but as an opportunity to spread the same liberation he had brought to Lycaeus across a galaxy of enslaved worlds. This would put him at odds with some of his brothers, who saw the crusade primarily as a military exercise or an expansion of imperial territory. For Corax, it was always about the people. The drop site massacre, betrayal and survival. The Horus heresy shattered the Imperium and destroyed the dreams of unity that had driven the Great Crusade. But for Corvus Corax and the Raven Guard, the betrayal cut deeper than for almost any other loyal legion. The drop site massacre at Istvan V was not merely a defeat. It was not even just a betrayal. It was the systematic annihilation of 3 entire Space Marine legions, orchestrated by their own brothers, carried out with calculated precision, designed to ensure maximum destruction. When word reached the loyalist Primarchs that War Master Horus had turned traitor and was fortifying himself on Istvan V, the response was immediate and massive. 7 legions were dispatched to bring the War Master to justice. The first wave would consist of the Iron Hands under Ferrus Manus, the Salamanders under Vulcan, and the Raven Guard under Corvus Corax. These 3 legions would make the initial assault, with 4 more legions arriving as reinforcements: the Iron Warriors, the Wordbearers, the Night Lords, and the Alpha Legion. Corax had misgivings from the start. The plan relied too much on brute force for his taste, and he questioned the wisdom of using secondary wave tactics when dealing with someone as strategically brilliant as Horus. But Ferrus Manus was determined to strike quickly, to punish the traitor before he could consolidate his position. Corax and Vulcan deferred to their brother's judgment, though both harbored doubts. Those doubts would prove tragically well-founded. The first wave's assault began with typical Astartes efficiency. Drop pods and Thunderhawks screamed through Istvan V's atmosphere, disgorging thousands of space marines onto the planet's volcanic plains. The traitor forces seemed initially overwhelmed, falling back before the fury of the Loyalist advance. Ferrus Manus, always impetuous, pressed forward hard, his iron hands driving deep into traitor lines. Vulcan and Corax were more cautious, but they too advanced, following the plan that called for a rapid crushing of traitor resistance before the second wave arrived. And then the second wave landed. The Iron Warriors, Wordbearers, Night Lords, and Alpha Legion deployed exactly as planned, taking positions that should have been used to support the first wave and complete the encirclement of traitor forces. But instead of advancing to aid their brothers, they opened fire on them. The Loyalist legions found themselves caught in a killing box, fired upon from all directions by Astartes, who until moments before had been counted as allies. The volcanic plains of Istvan V became a charnel house, stained with the blood of those who had believed in brotherhood and unity. Corax found himself in the midst of chaos, watching his sons die by the hundreds, as bolter fire tore through them from positions that should have been friendly. The Raven Guard's specialization in stealth and precision strikes became a liability in this kind of open killing ground. They were being massacred. Through the din of battle, Corax could see Ferrus Manus pressing forward in a berserker rage, determined to reach Horus and end the rebellion with his own hands. The Primarch of the Iron Hands would never return from that charge, his head taken by Fulgrim's blade in a duel that represented the death of brotherhood itself. But while Ferrus died in glorious fury, Corvus Corax chose survival, not for himself, but for his legion. He began organizing a fighting withdrawal, using every scrap of tactical knowledge and every advantage of terrain to extract what remained of his forces from the killing field. It was during this withdrawal that he encountered Lorgar Aurelian, Primarch of the Wordbearers, the architect of so much of the Imperium's corruption. The two Primarchs clashed amid the carnage, and what followed revealed the vast gulf in their martial capabilities. Corvus Corax was a warrior born and bred, trained from childhood in combat and honed through decades of the Great Crusade's hardest fighting. Lorgar, by contrast, was a preacher and philosopher, more comfortable with words than weapons. The fight was brutally one-sided. Corax tore through Lorgar's defenses with contemptuous ease, his lightning claws ripping through the Wordbearer's armor, drawing blood with each strike. For a moment, it seemed that one of the architects of the heresy would die on Istvan's black sand, that some measure of justice would be extracted from the day's horror. Then Conrad Curzy intervened. The Night Haunter, Primarch of the Night Lords, fell upon Corax from behind with all the savage unpredictability that defined him. Suddenly Corax found himself fighting two Primarchs simultaneously, and even his considerable skill could not overcome those odds while simultaneously trying to extract his legion from the trap. The moment of opportunity passed. Lorgar survived, and with him survived the architect of Chaos's corruption within the legions. That failure would haunt Corax for millennia. For 98 days, the survivors of the Raven Guard fought a desperate guerrilla campaign on Istvan V. Corax used every trick he knew, every tactical lesson learned on Lycaeus and refined during the Great Crusade. They struck from the shadows, hit supply lines, assassinated isolated traitor commanders, and made the traitors pay for every inch of ground. But they were wounded mortals, fighting fresh demigods. Casualties mounted relentlessly. Of the 80,000 Raven Guard who had made planetfall on Istvan V, fewer than 3,000 remained when Korax finally managed to lead them off-world. The psychological impact of the massacre cannot be overstated. Korax had built the Raven Guard into a precision instrument, a legion that valued every single battle brother, not as an expendable resource, but as an individual whose life had value and meaning. To watch 97% of them die, not in glorious battle, but in a carefully orchestrated slaughter perpetrated by their own supposed brothers, broke something in the Primarch. The certainties that had guided him, the belief in the inherent goodness of the Imperium's cause and the brotherhood of the legions, shattered like glass. Worse still was the knowledge that his hesitation in killing Lorgar had potentially doomed the galaxy. If he had been just seconds faster, if Kersey had not intervened, the architect of the heresy might have died before spreading his poisonous faith further. How many millions of lives might have been saved? How many worlds spared corruption? These questions would torture Korax for the remainder of his existence, fueling the obsession that would eventually drive him into the Eye of Terror. The Raven Guard who survived Istvan V were forever changed. They had seen the worst that betrayal could produce. They had fought for 3 months against impossible odds and survived through nothing but skill, determination, and their Primarch's tactical genius. They would become the nucleus of a rebuilt legion, but they would never forget the lesson of the Black Sand. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored. The Raptor Project, desperation and horror. The shattered remnants of the Raven Guard limped back to deliverance, their fortress monastery world, carrying the psychological and physical wounds of Istvan V. Korax found his legion reduced to a shadow of its former strength. Barely 3,000 Astartes, where once there had been 80,000. In the context of a galaxy-spanning civil war, these numbers were catastrophically insufficient. While other legions numbered in the tens or hundreds of thousands, the Raven Guard barely had enough warriors to defend their own home system, let alone contribute meaningfully to the wider war against Horus. The Primarch faced a terrible dilemma. The Imperium desperately needed every loyal space marine it could field, but the traditional process of creating new Astartes was achingly slow. Even with optimal conditions, it took years to transform a normal human aspirant into a full battle brother. Gene seed, the precious biological material needed to create new space marines, had to be harvested from existing Astartes and carefully cultivated. The Raven Guard's gene seed stocks had been severely depleted during the massacre, and what remained could not be rushed without risking mutation or failure. At the standard rate of recruitment and training, it would take decades to rebuild the Legion to even half its former strength. The heresy would be decided long before then. Korax sought an audience with the Emperor himself, traveling to Terra to petition his father for aid. What transpired in that meeting remains known only to a select few, but its results would shape the Raven Guard's destiny and add another layer of tragedy to an already grief-stricken legion. The Emperor granted Korax access to something that should never have been shared: the original genetic research that had led to the creation of the Primarchs themselves, hidden in a secret laboratory beneath the Imperial Palace. This knowledge, the Emperor warned, was dangerous beyond measure. It represented the ability to accelerate Space Marine creation, but it also carried tremendous risks. Nevertheless, recognizing the desperate nature of the war and perhaps trusting in his son's scientific acumen, the Emperor allowed Korax to study and utilize this forbidden knowledge. Returning to Deliverance with priceless data, Korax assembled his most skilled apothecaries and set to work. The goal was to create a modified gene seed that would allow for rapid mass production of new Space Marines. The process would be faster, more efficient, and would allow the Raven Guard to field combat-ready Astartes in a fraction of the normal time. Early tests seemed promising. The accelerated gene seed worked exactly as intended, producing warriors who grew faster, learned quicker, and were ready for combat deployment in months rather than years. But the Raven Guard's enemies were not idle. Alpha Legion operatives, masters of infiltration and sabotage, had managed to insert themselves deep into Deliverance's infrastructure. These agents, working with meticulous precision, corrupted the gene seed stocks that Corax was using for his rapid recruitment program. The corruption was subtle enough to avoid immediate detection, but devastating in its long-term effects. The tainted gene seed began producing mutations in the new recruits, transformations that grew progressively worse with each generation. At first, the changes were minor. Enhanced muscle mass beyond even normal Astartes standards. Slight alterations in bone structure. These could be written off as acceptable variations, the price of accelerated development, but the mutations accelerated. Battle Brothers began exhibiting grotesque deformities, limbs that grew to disproportionate lengths, musculature that expanded until it crushed internal organs, skeletal structures that warped and twisted, turning proud warriors into barely functional monsters. Most horrifying of all, many of these warriors retained their full mental faculties even as their bodies betrayed them, conscious and aware as they transformed into things that should not exist. Corax tried everything to halt or reverse the mutations. His apothecaries worked themselves to exhaustion seeking a cure. Gene therapy was attempted. Surgical interventions were tested. Nothing worked. The corruption was too deeply embedded in the genetic material itself, and each new generation of raptors, as the accelerated recruits were called, exhibited worse mutations than the last. Some of the transformed warriors had to be kept in specialized containment facilities, their size and strength making them dangerous even to other Astartes. Others died slowly, their biology consuming itself from within. The Primarch was faced with an impossible choice. He could not allow these suffering warriors to continue their tormented existence. They were in constant pain, their bodies rejecting their own existence on a cellular level. Many begged for death, pleading with their gene father to release them from agony. But to kill them would be to execute his own sons, warriors who had done nothing wrong beyond answering the call to serve. They had been willing to undergo the accelerated process, knowing the risks, believing in their Primarch's vision for rebuilding the Legion. In the end, Corax chose mercy over hope. In what must have been one of the darkest days in the Raven Guard's history, the Primarch personally administered the Emperor's peace to each of the mutated raptors. This was not a task he delegated. He did not ask his apothecaries or chaplains to bear this burden. Corvus Corax took up his weapons and ended the suffering of hundreds of warriors who called him father, who trusted him, who had been transformed into monsters through no fault of their own, but through his decision to use forbidden knowledge. The psychological impact of this act cannot be overstated. Corax was a liberator, someone who had spent his entire existence fighting against oppression and cruelty. He valued life, treasured his warriors as individuals rather than resources. And now he had led hundreds of them to fates worse than death, then been forced to personally execute them to end their suffering. The guilt was crushing. Every mutated face haunted him. Every plea for death echoed in his memory. The Raptor Project, intended to save the Raven Guard, had instead added to the weight of failure that pressed down on the Primarch's shoulders. What made it worse was the knowledge that the project had been sabotaged, that Alpha Legion operatives had corrupted his work. But that didn't change the fact that it was his decision to use forbidden genetic knowledge, his choice to accelerate the process beyond safe limits, his responsibility as Primarch and Gene Father. The Alpha Legion had provided the means for disaster, but Corax had created the conditions that made it possible. That distinction meant everything to someone like Corvus Corax, who held himself to impossible standards of personal accountability. The failure of the Raptor Project fundamentally changed Corax's relationship with the Imperium, and with his own nature as a Primarch. He had been given access to his father's greatest secrets and had produced only monsters and death. He had tried to take a shortcut, to find a quick solution to a complex problem, and the result had been catastrophic. This lesson would inform his actions for the rest of his existence, reinforcing a tendency towards self-punishment and an obsession with making amends for perceived failures. The Raven Guard, already devastated by Istvan V, now carried an additional burden of horror. The surviving members of the Legion knew about the Raptor project, had watched brothers transform into monsters, had heard the screams from the containment facilities. This knowledge became another secret they would keep, another shadow in a Legion already defined by shadows. They would rebuild slowly, carefully, using traditional methods. They would never again attempt to rush the sacred process of creating Space Marines. The price had been too high. Into the Eye, the hunt begins. When the Horus heresy finally ground to its bloody conclusion, with the Emperor entombed on the Golden Throne and Horus slain, the Imperium began the painful process of rebuilding. Robert Guilliman's Codex Astartes mandated the breaking of the legions into smaller chapters, a reform designed to prevent any future civil war from claiming the resources of full legion strength. Most Primarchs accepted this reorganization, some reluctantly, some with relief. Corvus Corax accepted it with barely a word, his mind already elsewhere. The Raven Guard was divided according to Guilliman's dictates, spawning several successor chapters. Given the Legion's depleted numbers after Istvan V and the disaster of the Raptor project, they could only create a handful of successors: the Raptors, the Revilers, and the Black Guard among them. But even as these new chapters took shape, even as the Raven Guard themselves reorganized under the new structure, their Primarch was withdrawing. He spent more and more time alone in the highest chambers of the Ravenspire, the fortress monastery on Deliverance. Days stretched into weeks, weeks into months. A full standard year passed with Corax locked away, speaking to no one, refusing all visitors. What thoughts consumed him during that year of isolation? We can only speculate. The weight of the Raven Guard's near destruction at Istvan V, the faces of the mutated raptors he had been forced to kill, the memory of Lorgar's throat within reach of his lightning, claws, only to have victory stolen by Kurz's intervention. The knowledge that many of the traitor Primarchs who had orchestrated the drop site massacre were still alive, had fled into the Eye of Terror rather than face justice for their crimes. Each of these thoughts must have circled endlessly in his mind, feeding an obsession that grew with each passing day. When Corax finally emerged from his isolation, those who saw him were struck by the change. The Primarch, who had always been grim and focused, now seemed hollow, consumed by some inner fire that burned away everything else. He spoke only once, gathering what remained of the Raven Guard's leadership to make an announcement. He was leaving. He would pursue the traitors into the Eye of Terror itself, hunting them through whatever hell they had fled to, making them pay for their betrayal. His final words before departing were a single word, heavy with meaning and finality: nevermore. The choice of that word was deeply significant to those who knew the Primarch. Nevermore was more than just a declaration that he would not return. It was a reference to ancient Terran literature, to tales of loss and sorrow that could never be undone. It was Corax's way of saying that the person he had been, the liberator who believed in building a better future, was gone. All that remained was the hunter, the engine of vengeance, who would pursue traitors until either they or he ceased to exist. The Raven Guard was left orphaned, its father departing on what everyone understood to be a one-way journey into the most dangerous region of space in the known galaxy. The Eye of Terror is not merely a dangerous place. It is a wound in reality itself, a region where the barriers between the material universe and the immaterium have been torn away. Within the Eye, the laws of physics become suggestions at best. Time flows differently or not at all. Cause and effect lose their meaning. The landscape itself shifts and changes according to the whims of demons and demon primarchs. It is a place where human sanity cannot survive intact, where even space marines, with all their genetic and psychological conditioning, can be corrupted and destroyed. Into this nightmare realm, Corvus Corax plunged alone. He carried with him his signature weapons, a pair of meter-long lightning claws and the coiled whip that had served him since the liberation of Lycaeus. He wore his sable armor, marked with the honors of 100 campaigns, but bearing no ornamentation that might slow him or catch on obstacles. He brought no support fleet, no company of warriors to guard his back. This was a solo hunt, a personal quest for vengeance that could not be delegated or shared. What happened to Corax during his first centuries in the Eye of Terror remains largely unknown to the Imperium. The Primarch did not send messages back to Deliverance. He made no reports, claimed no victories, announced no progress. For all the Raven Guard knew, their Genefather had died within days of entering the Eye, consumed by demons or lost in temporal distortions. They held no funeral because they had no body. They simply marked him as missing, added his name to the rolls of honor alongside all the other losses the chapter had suffered, and carried on in his absence. But Corvus Corax did not die. Instead, something far stranger and more terrible occurred. The Primarch began to change. Exposure to the raw energies of the warp, combined with his unique nature as a Primarch, his innate connection to shadow and stealth, catalyzed a transformation. Corax's natural ability to blend with shadows, what he had always called his wraith slip, began to evolve into something far more profound. The boundary between his physical form and the darkness around him started to blur. His body, already sculpted from the Emperor's genetic genius, began incorporating aspects of the warp itself. This transformation was not the same as the corruption that claimed the traitor Primarchs. Lorgar, Magnus, Mortarion, and the others who became demon Primarchs had surrendered themselves to the Chaos Gods, accepting daemonic power in exchange for their souls and autonomy. They had been remade by beings they now served. Corax underwent no such bargain. He made no pacts with the Dark Gods. Instead, his change was more fundamental, more disturbing in its implications. The Primarch was discovering what he truly was beneath the flesh his father had wrapped around a warp-born essence. All Primarchs, Corax came to understand, were beings of the warp given physical form through the Emperor's genetic sorcery. They were not truly material creatures in the way normal humans were. They were warp entities bound into flesh, shaped by the Emperor's will, into tools that could function in real space. The physical bodies they wore were like armor or clothing, necessary to interact with the material universe, but not their true nature. For most Primarchs, this fundamental truth remained hidden, buried under layers of flesh and conditioning. But in the Eye of Terror, where the boundaries between warp and reality dissolved, Corax could no longer maintain that separation. His true nature began to manifest. The transformation gave Corax abilities that would have been impossible in real space. He could dissolve into pure shadow, becoming incorporeal and able to move through solid objects. He could split himself into a flock of ravens, each bird carrying a fraction of his consciousness, allowing him to be in multiple places simultaneously. His physical form became mutable, able to extend blades from any surface of his body, to reshape itself according to need. He could see through any darkness, move through any shadow, strike from angles that should have been impossible. He had become something that existed in the space between demon and Primarch, neither fully material nor fully immaterial, drawing power from both states of being. With these new abilities, Corax began his hunt in earnest. The Word-Bearers became his primary targets, the object of his obsessive hatred. They had been there at Istvan V, had fired upon his sons while pretending to be reinforcements. Their primarch, Lorgar, had escaped death only through Kurz's intervention. The word-bearers represented everything Corax despised. Blind faith turned to darkness, betrayal cloaked in religious fervor, cruelty disguised as devotion. He stalked them through the demon worlds of the Eye, appearing without warning to slaughter entire squads, disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. The word-bearers began to speak of a monster that hunted them, a shadow that killed without mercy or hesitation. Entire warbands went silent, found days later as nothing but corpses torn apart with savage precision. Demon-possessed champions, beings that should have been nearly invincible, were discovered dead with their heads removed or their hearts torn out. The word-bearers tried to set traps, used sorcery to detect their stalker, called upon demonic aid. Nothing worked. Corax was faster, smarter, and more determined than anything they could field against him. He had spent 10,000 years learning to fight in conditions that would drive normal beings insane. The Eye of Terror was his hunting ground now, and he knew every shadow in it. Shadow of the past, the Raven and the Golden Sun. Deep within the Eye of Terror, on a demon world where reality bent to the will of its corrupted masters, a word-bearer's warband was conducting a ritual. They stood in a circle around an altar stained with blood, both ancient and fresh, chanting in languages that human throats were never meant to speak. The ritual was important, they believed. It would grant them favor with the dark gods, would secure blessings for upcoming campaigns. They were wrong about its importance. The ritual's true significance would be that it drew the attention of something far more dangerous than demons. The first word-bearer died without a sound, simply collapsing as if his strings had been cut. His brothers didn't notice immediately, their attention focused on their chanting. The second fell with a wet, gurgling sound as his throat opened from an invisible blade. This drew some notice, but before the word-bearers could react, the shadows themselves seemed to come alive. Darkness flowed up from the ground like tar, engulfing warriors and dragging them down despite their superhuman strength. Bolt of fire filled the air, but the shots simply disappeared into the black, accomplishing nothing. One by one, the word-bearers were killed, often in sight of their brothers, but too fast for anyone to intervene. The darkness moved with impossible speed, striking and withdrawing before counterattack could be mounted. Those who tried to flee found their paths blocked by walls of living shadow. Those who stood their ground were cut down where they stood. The massacre was methodical, efficient, and utterly terrifying. These were Chaos Space Marines, warriors who had fought for 10 millennia, who had seen horrors that would break mortal minds, and they were being slaughtered like children. The last word-bearer, a veteran who had fought at Istvan V itself, found himself face to face with the source of their destruction. The darkness coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape, tall as a primarch, with features that were mostly shadow but occasionally flickered into something recognizable. Alabaster skin, hair black as midnight, eyes like chips of solid darkness. The word-bearer recognized those features, impossible as it seemed. He whispered a name. Corvus Corax. The shadow thing that wore the Raven Lord's face nodded. When it spoke, its voice was Corax's voice, but filtered through layers of unreality, as if it came from a vast distance. I am vengeance incarnate. I am justice delivered. The word-bearer tried to level his bolter, but tendrils of shadow had already wrapped around his arms, crushing them until the weapon fell from nerveless fingers. This place, Corax continued, beyond the veil, has revealed what we all are. Underneath the veneer of humanity our Father crafted for us, we are of the warp. More word-bearers were converging on the location now, drawn by Vox transmissions that had managed to get out before communications were cut. But they were not the only ones responding to the disturbance. A portal tore open in the fabric of reality, blazing with golden light that seemed obscene in the perpetual twilight of the demon world. Through that portal stepped Lorgar Aurelian, the Urizen, Primarch of the Word-Bearers and Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided. He had sensed something amiss with his sons and come to investigate, bringing with him an aura of divine authority that caused lesser demons to bow. The reunion between the two Primarchs was not emotional. There were no recriminations exchanged, no lengthy speeches about betrayal and loyalty. Both were beyond such things now. Lorgar had ascended to demonhood, becoming a being of pure chaos power, wrapped in a mockery of flesh. Corax had transformed into something that existed in the space between demon and Primarch, a creature of shadow and wrath. They were no longer the beings who had faced each other on Istvan V, but the hatred between them was as strong as ever. "I have ascended," Lorgar announced, his voice carrying harmonics that hurt to hear. He indicated Corax with a gesture of his Crozius, the symbol of his dark authority. "I might ask the same of you." The implication was clear. Corax's transformation was so profound that even a demon Primarch needed to verify his identity. "I am what I always have been," Corax replied, his form shifting and flickering as he spoke. "I am vengeance incarnate. I am justice delivered. This place, beyond the veil, has revealed what we all are." He stepped forward, and the word-bearers scattered before him, unwilling to face what their Primarch seemed barely willing to confront. "Underneath the veneer of humanity our Father crafted for us, we are of the warp." Lorgar's response was cut off as Corax attacked. The Raven Lord moved with a speed that defied comprehension, closing the distance between them in an instant that seemed to skip over the intervening space entirely. His form split apart into a cloud of ravens, each bird trailing shadow, and then reformed right in front of Lorgar with lightning claws already swinging. The demon Primarch barely managed to raise his Crozius in defense, and the impact of their collision sent a shockwave through the surrounding landscape. What followed was a battle that few mortals could have comprehended. The two Primarchs moved faster than unaugmented eyes could track, exchanging blows that would have shattered tanks or leveled buildings. Lorgar channeled the dark gifts of the Chaos Gods, hurling demonic fire and calling upon entities of the Warp to assault his opponent. But Corax had spent millennia learning to fight in the Eye of Terror. He knew how to counter sorcery, how to move through demonic manifestations, how to turn the very instability of the Warp against those who relied upon it. The fight was profoundly unequal. Lorgar was powerful, there could be no doubt of that. He wielded abilities that could have destroyed whole companies of space marines. But he was fundamentally a preacher, a prophet, a being whose strength came from faith and sorcery. Corvus Corax was a warrior, pure and simple, someone who had been training for combat since childhood on Lycaeus, and had never stopped refining his skills. The Daemon Primarch fought with power. Corax fought with precision, skill, and 10 millennia of accumulated hatred. Lorgar's defenses were shredded. His armor was torn open, revealing the writhing warp stuff beneath. His Crozius was knocked aside. His sorcerous shields were pierced. Corax's lightning claws carved through demonic flesh, each strike drawing ichor that burned as it hit the ground. The word-bearers watching could only stand paralyzed, unable to intervene without risking their Primarch's wrath, but equally unable to simply stand by while he was being destroyed. But Lorgar was not without resources. He was a demon Primarch, a being who existed partially outside the normal constraints of mortality. And he had no intention of dying here, in this place, at the hands of a brother he had wronged so long ago. With a final burst of power, the demon Primarch tore open a new portal behind himself, a gateway back to wherever he had come from. He stumbled backward through it, his form already beginning to heal from the grievous wounds Corax had inflicted. The golden light of the portal washed over the battlefield, creating harsh shadows that seemed to accentuate the Raven Lord's inhuman nature. As the portal began to close, Corax lunged forward, trying to follow, but Lorgar was faster, slamming the gateway shut from the other side. The last thing visible was the demon Primarch's face, twisted with what might have been fear or fury or both. Then the portal collapsed, leaving Corax standing alone amid the corpses of word-bearers. His prey escaped once more. "I have your scent now," Corax said to the empty air where the portal had been, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "I will hunt you to the ends of the universe if necessary. You will never know peace. You will never know safety. Every shadow will be me. Every darkness will hold my wrath. And one day, Lorgar, one day I will tear out your throat and watch you die as you deserve." The remaining word-bearers, those who had witnessed this confrontation, fled. They would carry the tale back to their brothers, warning them that the shadow that hunted them was no mere demon or warp entity. It was Corvus Corax, Primarch of the Raven Guard, transformed by the Eye of Terror into something that existed between material and immaterial, between vengeance and justice. And it would never stop hunting. The confrontation left several things clear to all involved. First, Corvus Corax was not only alive, but more dangerous than ever. His transformation had not weakened him. It had enhanced his natural abilities to terrifying degrees. Second, he retained his loyalty to the Emperor and the Imperium, despite his transformation. He had not fallen to chaos, had not been corrupted by millennia in the Eye of Terror. If anything, his hatred of the traitors had only grown stronger. Third, and perhaps most importantly, he was hunting specific targets with single-minded determination, and chief among those targets was Lorgar. The demon Primarch had good reason to fear. There existed a prophecy, spoken long ago during the Horus Heresy, that Corax would be the death of Lorgar. The Wordbearer's own seers had warned their Primarch that should he cross blades with the Raven Lord, he would not survive. Lorgar had dismissed these warnings during the heresy, protected by the presence of other traitor Primarchs, who could intervene as Kurz had done at Istvan V. But now, 10 millennia later, alone in the Eye of Terror with a being who had been shaped into a perfect engine of vengeance, the prophecy seemed far more credible. For the Wordbearers, the knowledge that their Primarch could be killed by Corax had profound implications. They increased security around Lorgar, though what defense could truly stop a being who could move as shadow? They attempted to track the Raven Lord's movements through the Eye, though his nature made such tracking nearly impossible. Most importantly, they began to question whether their Primarch was truly as powerful and untouchable as they had believed. If Corvus Corax, alone and unsupported, could drive their demon-enhanced Genefather into retreat, what did that say about the power balance within the Eye of Terror? The encounter also revealed something crucial about Corax's state of mind. He was not insane, despite millennia of exposure to the warp's corrupting influence. He was not a mindless engine of destruction, despite his transformation into a shadow being. He retained his intelligence, his tactical acumen, his ability to speak and reason. But he had been reduced to a single purpose: hunting traitors. Everything else that had once defined Corvus Corax, the liberator, the revolutionary, the thoughtful strategist, had been burned away by guilt and rage. What remained was pure vengeance, given form and purpose. The Imperium today, a galaxy at breaking point. While Corvus Corax hunted traitors in the Eye of Terror, the Imperium he had left behind continued its slow descent into twilight. 10,000 years after the Horus Heresy, the realm the Emperor had built was a grim mockery of its original vision. Where once there had been hope for a unified human civilization spanning the stars, there was now only endless war, grinding bureaucracy, and the slow decay of institutions that could no longer remember their original purposes. The Imperium survived not because it thrived, but because it was too vast and too stubborn to die easily. The Raven Guard, like all the Loyalist chapters descended from the original legions, continued their eternal vigil. Based on deliverance, they maintained their specialization in stealth warfare, infiltration, and precision strikes. But the chapter that persisted in the 41st millennium bore little resemblance to the legion that Corax had led during the Great Crusade. 10 millennia of isolation from their Primarch, 10 millennia of fighting without his guidance had changed them. They developed their own traditions, their own interpretations of his teachings. The trifold path of shadow, a doctrine designed to help control the battle madness known as the Sable brand, became central to their identity. The shadow rituals, a complex system of silent communication and psychological conditioning, defined their brotherhood. But the Raven Guard also suffered from the lasting effects of the Istvan V massacre and the Raptor Project disaster. Their gene seed was notoriously unstable, prone to rejection and failure. This meant recruitment was a slower and more difficult process than for other chapters, limiting their numbers and making each Battle Brothers' loss more keenly felt. In the 32nd millennium, a catastrophic gene seed degeneration struck the chapter, rendering much of their stored genetic material useless. From that point forward, the Raven Guard relied increasingly on gene seed stocks from Terra, adding another layer of complication to their already challenging recruitment process. The successor chapters that traced their lineage to Corax faced similar problems. The Raptors, the Revilers, the Black Guard, and others all exhibited variations of the gene seed instability that plagued their progenitor chapter. Some dealt with this better than others, adapting their recruitment practices or accepting higher casualty rates among aspirants. But all of them shared the shadow of Istvan V and the knowledge that their Primarch had disappeared into the Eye of Terror, abandoning them to face the galaxy alone. This abandonment, however understandable given Corax's psychological state after the heresy, created a complicated legacy. The Raven Guard revered their Primarch as a figure of liberation and tactical genius. His axioms guided their warfare. His example inspired their dedication to fighting for the oppressed. But there was also an undercurrent of loss, a feeling that their father had chosen personal vengeance over his responsibility to them. This was never spoken aloud, of course. To question a Primarch's decision would be blasphemy, but it shaped how the chapter viewed themselves, as orphans who had learned to thrive without parental guidance. And then, the galaxy broke. In 9999 M41, Abaddon the Despoiler launched his 13th Black Crusade, the culmination of 10,000 years of preparation. The Warmaster of Chaos had been gathering strength, learning from his previous failures, building an army that could finally overwhelm the Imperium's defenses. His target was Cadia, the fortress world that guarded the only stable route out of the Eye of Terror. For generations, Cadia had stood firm against the tide of chaos, its people hardened by constant warfare, its defenses reinforced by the greatest military infrastructure the Imperium could muster. But Abaddon was not merely trying to conquer Cadia. His true goal was far more destructive. Beneath the planet's surface lay ancient pylons, Necron technology from a previous age that helped stabilize reality and prevent the Eye of Terror from expanding. If these pylons could be destroyed, if Cadia could be shattered, the Eye would grow explosively, tearing a wound across the galaxy. Abaddon achieved his objective. Cadia fell, not through conquest, but through deliberate destruction, with the Warmaster ramming a Blackstone fortress into the planet's surface to ensure complete annihilation. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. Without Cadia's pylons to contain it, the Eye of Terror exploded outward, spawning warp storms that raced across the galaxy like a cancer. These storms merged with other areas of instability, creating a massive tear in reality that stretched from the Eye of Terror in the galactic west all the way to the Hadex anomaly in the east. This wound in space became known as the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, and it fundamentally divided the Imperium in two. On one side of the rift, the Imperium Sanctus, Holy Terror, remained visible. The Astronomican's light still reached through the darkness to guide navigators. These worlds, while beset by unprecedented levels of warp storm activity and demonic incursion, at least maintained some connection to the beating heart of the Imperium. They could receive reinforcements from Terra. They could coordinate strategies across sectors. They could believe, however falsely, that the Emperor's protection reached them. On the other side of the rift lay the Imperium Nihilus, the Dark Imperium, and there things were far worse. The Astronomican's light was obscured, making warp travel nearly impossible without it being a suicidal gamble. Worlds found themselves isolated, cut off from any hope of reinforcement or rescue. Communication became sporadic at best. The warp storms that comprised the Great Rift spawned demon worlds where none had existed before. Entire planets transformed overnight into nightmarish parodies of reality. Chaos warbands roamed with impunity, no longer constrained by the need to hide or strike only when opportunity presented. They could simply conquer and hold territory, establishing permanent footholds in Imperial space. Deliverance, the homeworld of the Raven Guard, found itself on the wrong side of the rift. The chapter that had already suffered so much now found itself cut off from Terra, unable to resupply its gene seed stocks from the Mechanicus vaults, unable to coordinate with other Imperial forces on anything like a systematic basis. They were alone in a darkness that had become literal as well as metaphorical. The Raven Guard adapted, as they had always adapted, continuing to fight for worlds that believed themselves abandoned by the Imperium, striking from the shadows at enemies who thought themselves unopposed. But the Imperium had one advantage it had not possessed since the dark days of the heresy: a living Primarch. Reboot Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, had been in stasis for 10 millennia after being mortally wounded by Fulgrim. Now, through a combination of Eldari intervention and the efforts of the tech priest Belisarius Cawl, he had been revived. Guilliman took up the mantle of Lord Commander of the Imperium, attempting to organize some kind of coherent response to the galaxy's collapse. He launched the Indomitus Crusade, a massive military campaign designed to retake lost worlds and re-establish Imperial control on both sides of the Great Rift. The Indomitus Crusade brought with it innovations that would have seemed impossible before Guilliman's return. The Primaris Space Marines, a new breed of Astartes created from Belisarius Cawl's refinement of the Emperor's original work, began appearing in chapters across the Imperium. These warriors were larger, stronger, and more resilient than traditional Space Marines, though their introduction was not without controversy. Some chapters welcomed them eagerly. Others viewed them with suspicion, wondering what else Cawl might have changed in the sacred gene seed. The Raven Guard received their share of Primaris reinforcements, warriors wearing Phobos armor designed specifically for stealth operations, perfectly suited to the chapter's combat doctrine. Guilliman also made strategic appointments, recognizing that the Imperium Nihilus needed leadership that could function without constant communication with Terra. He appointed Commander Dante of the Blood Angels as regent of the Imperium Nihilus, giving the ancient chapter master authority to make decisions on behalf of the Imperium in the isolated regions beyond the Rift. It was a recognition that the Imperium could no longer be governed from Terra alone, that the galaxy had become too large and too divided for centralized control. And then a second Primarch returned. Lion L. Johnson, Primarch of the Dark Angels, emerged from a stasis that had lasted 10 millennia. He had been sleeping in the depths of the rock, the Dark Angels' fortress monastery, healing from wounds received during his duel with Luther. Now, awakened into a galaxy that seemed on the verge of collapse, the Lion took up his father's shield and joined the fight. His return brought hope to the beleaguered Imperium, proof that the Emperor's sons were not all dead or lost. But it also raised questions. If two Primarchs could return, why not others? This is the context into which Corvus Corax might emerge from the Eye of Terror. An Imperium divided by a literal wound in reality. A galaxy where demons walk openly on thousands of worlds. A military situation so desperate that the return of a Primarch, even one transformed by millennia in the warp, might be welcomed rather than feared. The Raven Guard, isolated in the Imperium Nihilus, fighting wars they cannot hope to win alone, maintaining traditions taught by a Primarch who vanished 10,000 years ago. All the pieces are in place for a story that could reshape the galaxy, if only Corvus Corax would emerge from the darkness he has inhabited for so long. The return. How might it happen? Speculation about how Corvus Corax might return from the Eye of Terror must account for several factors. The Primarch has been hunting traitors in that hellish realm for 10 millennia, transformed by the warp into something between demon and Primarch, existing in a state that defies easy categorization. He has shown no indication of wanting to return to the Imperium, his entire focus centered on vengeance against those who betrayed him at Istvan V. Yet there are multiple scenarios under which the Ravenlord might find himself drawn back into real space, whether by choice or necessity. The most straightforward possibility involves Lorgar. The demon Primarch has apparently ended his 10,000-year meditation and is rumored to be active again in the current timeline. If Lorgar emerges from the Eye of Terror to lead Wordbearer's forces in some major campaign, Corax would almost certainly follow. The Ravenlord has hunted the Horizon for millennia, has sworn to kill him, has made the destruction of the Wordbearers his purpose for existing. If Lorgar ventures into real space, particularly if he targets worlds with symbolic significance to the Imperium or to the Raven Guard specifically, Corax would pursue him. This would not be a return in the conventional sense. The Primarch would not be coming back to reclaim his legion or to serve the Imperium. He would simply be following his prey into new hunting grounds. Such a pursuit could manifest in terrifying ways for both Imperial and Chaos forces. Imagine Lorgar leading a massive Wordbearers invasion of a critical Imperial world, perhaps one with religious significance that makes it valuable for the demon Primarch's purposes. The defenders would find themselves overwhelmed, facing not just Chaos Space Marines, but demon-possessed warriors, summoned entities from the warp, and all the sorcerous might the Wordbearers command. And then, just as defeat seems inevitable, reports would begin coming in of Wordbearers dying in the shadows, entire squads found massacred with no clear explanation. The defenders might initially think they have some kind of unknown ally, perhaps a loyalist strike force operating covertly. But as the deaths accelerate, as Wordbearers begin screaming about shadows that kill, as even demon-possessed champions fall to an invisible hunter, terror would spread through Chaos ranks, and Lorgar would know. He would recognize the signs, remember the confrontation on that demon world millennia ago, feel the same fear that drove him to retreat then. The demon Primarch would be forced into a choice: stand and fight a battle he knows he cannot win, or flee once more and abandon his invasion. Another scenario involves the Raven Guard themselves calling out to their lost Primarch in desperation. The chapter has maintained their loyalty and their traditions for 10 millennia without Corax's guidance, but in the wake of the Great Rift's formation, with Deliverance isolated in the Imperium Nihilus, facing enemies on all sides with no hope of significant reinforcement, the chapter might reach its breaking point. In their darkest hour, fighting what seems to be an unwinnable war, the Raven Guard could perform rituals specifically designed to reach their Gene Father, to call him back from whatever hell he inhabits. Such rituals would be dangerous in the extreme. Attempting to contact anyone in the Eye of Terror risks drawing the attention of demons, or worse. The warp does not distinguish between calling out to a loyal Primarch and calling out to Chaos itself. But the Raven Guard are masters of operating in darkness, of taking calculated risks that others would deem suicidal. They might reason that if 2 Primarchs have already returned, why not a third? If Guilliman could be revived after 10,000 years, if the Lion could awaken from his long sleep, perhaps Corvus Corax could be summoned back to aid his sons in their hour of need. The response to such a summoning could be profound and unsettling. Imagine the ritual being performed in the depths of the Ravenspire, attended by the chapter's most senior members, the Master of Shadows himself leading the ceremony. As they chant and call out to their Primarch through whatever psychic channels they can access, the shadows in, The chamber begins to move with independent purpose. The temperature drops. The lights, already dim in keeping with Raven Guard preferences, gutter and threaten to go out entirely. And then a voice speaks from the darkness. A voice that hasn't been heard in 10 millennia, but is immediately recognizable to every Raven Guard present. "Why have you called me, my sons?" The appearance of Corax in response to such a summoning would be both blessing and curse. The chapter would have their Primarch back, or at least something that had once been their Primarch. But the being that emerged from the shadows would be far removed from the one who had departed. His form would be mutable, shifting between humanoid shape and clouds of shadow ravens. His eyes would be black voids that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. His presence would carry the weight of 10,000 years spent in the Eye of Terror, a burden that even Space Marines would feel pressing against their minds. A third possibility involves the Great Rift itself. The Cicatrix Maledictum is not a static phenomenon, but a constantly shifting wound in reality, spawning new warp storms and occasionally closing old ones according to no predictable pattern. The rift connects, in some fashion, to the Eye of Terror, representing an expansion of the same kind of reality space overlap that defines that ancient wound. For someone like Corax, who has mastered movement through the Eye's distorted geography, the Great Rift might represent an opportunity or a pathway. Consider that the rift cuts through the galaxy, passing near or through countless systems. Some of these systems have strategic importance, others have symbolic significance. If word-bearers or other traitor forces began using the rift as a highway for rapid deployment, striking at worlds that had been previously secure, Corax might follow them through it. He could emerge on the Imperial side of the rift without intending to return to the Imperium, simply pursuing targets of opportunity, and find himself in the midst of battles he had not sought but could not ignore. This scenario becomes even more interesting if we consider that the Imperium Nihilus is, in many ways, similar to the Eye of Terror in terms of warp instability and demonic presence. The light of the Astronomicon does not reach these worlds. Reality is frayed. Demons manifest with disturbing frequency. For a being like Corax, who has adapted to the Eye's conditions, the Imperium Nihilus might actually be easier to navigate than more stable Imperial space. He could move through its shadows with even greater freedom than he possessed in the Eye, striking at chaos forces wherever he found them, a ghost that kills in the darkness. A fourth scenario, perhaps the most hopeful from an Imperial perspective, involves direct contact from either Guilliman or the Lion. Both returned Primarchs know that their brother Corax entered the Eye of Terror. Both understand the strategic value of having another loyal Primarch active in the current crisis. Guilliman, in particular, as Lord Commander of the Imperium, might decide that attempting to locate and retrieve Corax is worth the risk. The Lion, being more prone to direct action, might simply enter the Eye himself to find his brother and drag him back if necessary. Such a mission would be monumentally dangerous. The Eye of Terror has consumed countless expeditions sent into it, but Primarchs are not normal beings, and they might possess abilities or knowledge that would allow them to survive where others would fail. Guilliman could potentially use his authority and resources to mount a massive expedition, complete with Grey Knights, Sisters of Silence, and the best navigators the Imperium possesses, all aimed at punching through to wherever Corax hunts. The Lion, with his connection to the warp through his ability to forest walk, might have his own methods of entering demon worlds and returning intact. The encounter between Corax and either of his brothers would be charged with emotion and tension. These Primarchs had not been close during the Great Crusade. Corax had always been somewhat isolated, focused on his mission of liberation rather than building strong relationships with his brothers. But they had fought together during the heresy, had shared the trauma of watching the Imperium tear itself apart. Seeing what Corax had become, what the Eye had made of him, would be shocking, even to beings who had witnessed the demon Primarch's transformations. Imagine Guilliman, always practical and rational, trying to convince Corax that his talents are needed elsewhere, that hunting individual traitors in the eye accomplishes less than returning to lead the Raven Guard in defending the Imperium. Corax's response would likely be cold and uncompromising. He has a mission. He has targets. The Imperium failed to stop the heresy. The Imperium allowed traitors to escape justice. Why should he return to serve an institution that has accomplished so little in 10,000 years? It would take persuasion of the highest order to change his mind, perhaps pointing out that Lorgar and other primary targets have become active outside the Eye, that the real fight is happening in real space now. Or imagine the Lion, more understanding of obsession and single-minded purpose, simply telling Corax that the war has changed, that their duty has changed, that it's time to come home. The Lion has always been about duty above all else, about doing what must be done regardless of personal feelings. He might frame it not as abandoning Corax's hunt, but as expanding it, pointing out that traitor Primarchs are active on both sides of the Great Rift now, that there are more targets available in real space than trapped in the Eye. Finally, there's the possibility that Corax returns because he has completed his mission in the Eye, or believes he has. If he managed to kill Lorgar, to actually fulfill the prophecy and end the Daemon Primarch permanently, he might find himself at loose ends. 10 millennia of single-minded purpose suddenly accomplished. What does an engine of vengeance do when it has no more targets? Does it shut down, or does it find new purpose? Corax might emerge from the Eye not seeking anything, not pursuing any goal, but simply because he's done with that phase of his existence and is ready to see what the galaxy has become in his absence. The transformed Primarch. What would he be? If Corvus Corax returns to the Imperium, the question of what he has become would be immediate and unavoidable. The being that emerges from the Eye of Terror would bear only superficial resemblance to the Primarch who entered it 10 millennia ago. His transformation, as glimpsed during the confrontation with Lorgar, suggests something far more profound than simple warp corruption. Corax has not become a demon Primarch in the traditional sense. He has not pledged himself to any chaos god. He has not traded his soul for power. Instead, he has undergone a metamorphosis that reveals the truth beneath the flesh all Primarchs wear. Physically, Corax would likely manifest in multiple forms, shifting between them according to need or preference. His primary humanoid form would retain recognizable elements: alabaster skin that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it, black hair falling past his shoulders, and those distinctive eyes that appear as solid black orbs without visible pupils. But this form would be unstable, its edges blurring into shadow, tendrils of darkness constantly writhing around him like living things. He would be taller than a normal Primarch, his transformation having removed any constraints the Emperor's original design had placed on his size. When he moved, reality itself would seem uncertain about whether he was occupying physical space or existing in some intermediate state between material and immaterial. His footsteps might leave no marks. His presence might not register on certain types of sensors. In dim lighting, he would be nearly invisible, and in complete darkness, he would be literally impossible to see with normal human vision. Even Space Marines, with their enhanced optics, would struggle to track him, their gene-enhanced eyes unable to resolve a target that existed partially outside real space. His shadow form would be even more disturbing. Corax could dissolve entirely into living darkness, becoming a roughly humanoid shape composed entirely of writhing shadow. In this state, he would be functionally intangible to normal weapons. Bolter shells would pass through him without effect. Power weapons would find no physical substance to cut. Even psychic attacks would struggle to gain purchase on a being who was himself partially composed of warp energy. The shadow form would allow Corax to pass through solid obstacles, flow through ventilation systems, emerge from any darkness to strike at his targets. His raven form would be perhaps the most visually striking. The Primarch could shatter into a flock of hundreds or thousands of ravens, each bird composed of solid shadow, but possessing weight and substance enough to tear flesh or carry objects. These ravens would maintain a collective consciousness, allowing Corax to be in multiple places simultaneously, while retaining full awareness of everything each bird experienced. The flock could reform into his humanoid shape at will, or individual ravens could detach to perform reconnaissance while the majority remained elsewhere. In terms of combat capability, the transformed Corax would be devastating beyond measure. His speed, already superhuman even for a Primarch, would be enhanced by his ability to move through shadows as if they were doorways. He could disappear from one location and reappear in another, connected by darkness, effectively teleporting short distances without using actual teleportation technology. This would make him nearly impossible to pin down in battle. Enemy commanders would never know where he would strike next. His weapons would be extensions of himself rather than separate objects. While he might still carry his traditional lightning claws and whip, the transformed Corax could generate blades of solidified shadow from any point on his body. These weapons would have the properties of both physical objects and warp manifestations, allowing them to cut through both material armor and psychic shields. They would leave wounds that were slow to heal, the shadow substance poisoning flesh and disrupting healing processes. Most terrifyingly, Corax would possess the ability to move through enemy ranks without being detected until he chose to strike. His enhanced Wraith Slip, evolved into full shadow walking, would allow him to become effectively invisible, even to those looking directly at him. He could stand in the middle of an enemy formation, perfectly still, and remain unnoticed until he decided to attack. Then he would explode into violence, killing dozens before fading back into invisibility. This would create a psychological effect beyond the physical casualties, as enemies would never know if they were safe or if the shadow that killed their comrades was standing next to them. But the transformation would not be purely physical. Corax's mind would also bear the marks of 10 millennia in the Eye of Terror. His thought processes would be different, shaped by existing in a place where reality was optional and cause-effect relationships were suggestions rather than laws. He might have difficulty communicating with normal humans, finding their linear thinking and concern with sequential time frustrating or incomprehensible. Conversations with him would be unsettling, as he might reference events that haven't happened yet, or speak of possibilities as if they were certainties. His voice would carry multiple layers, harmonics that weren't quite demonic, but weren't entirely material either. When he spoke, shadows would seem to deepen, temperatures would drop, and listeners would feel the weight of his attention like physical pressure. Even other space marines, genetically conditioned to feel no fear, would find themselves uneasy in his presence. He would smell of the eye's distinctive wrongness, a scent that combined ozone, burnt metal, and something organic that couldn't quite be identified. The question of whether Corax could or should be trusted would be immediate and controversial. The Inquisition would have strong opinions about a being who had spent 10,000 years in the Eye of Terror and emerged transformed by warp exposure. The fact that he retained his loyalty and had not fallen to chaos would be obvious from his actions, but it might not be sufficient for the more paranoid elements of imperial authority. There would be those who argued that he should be destroyed, or at least contained, that whatever he had become was too dangerous to allow freedom of action. The Grey Knights, the Space Marine, chapter specialized in fighting demons, would be particularly interested in examining Corax. They would recognize that he was not a demon in the traditional sense, not bound by the same rules or vulnerable to the same weapons. But they would also recognize that he was a being of immense power who existed partially in the warp. Their leadership would struggle with the question of whether this made him a threat or an asset. Could he be corrupted? Could his presence itself be corrupting to those around him? These questions would have no easy answers. From a practical standpoint, however, the Imperium desperately needs every advantage it can get. With the galaxy divided by the Great Rift, with demon Primarchs active on multiple fronts, with Xeno's threats pressing in from all directions. Having another loyal Primarch available would be invaluable regardless of how disturbing his transformation might be. Guilliman and the Lion would likely argue for giving Corax the benefit of the doubt, pointing out that he has spent 10,000 years hunting traitors rather than joining them, that his actions speak to his loyalty more clearly than his appearance speaks to corruption. The Raven Guard's reaction would be complex. On one hand, their Primarch has returned after 10 millennia. The chapter's most fervent prayers have been answered. On the other hand, the being who returns bears only passing resemblance to the one they've been venerating for 10,000 years. He is clearly not human in any conventional sense. He exhibits powers that look superficially similar to those wielded by demon Primarchs. How does a chapter process the return of their Gene Father when he comes back as something that might trigger every warning they've been taught about warp corruption? Impact on the Raven Guard. Faith tested. The Raven Guard's relationship with their Primarch has always been unique among the Space Marine chapters. For 10,000 years, they have maintained traditions and doctrines passed down from Corvus Corax, following his teachings despite his absence. The axioms of the Legiones. Astartes that he wrote still guide their strategy. The emphasis on liberation, rather than mere conquest, still shapes their choice of targets. The preference for precision and stealth over brute force still defines their tactical approach. Everything the chapter is has been built on the foundation of who Corax was when he left them. If he returns transformed, the chapter would face a crisis of faith unlike any they've experienced before. The immediate reaction among the rank and file would likely be joy and relief. Their Primarch has returned. The Emperor has answered their prayers. After 10 millennia of fighting without his guidance, they would finally have their Gene Father back to lead them. This euphoria would be particularly strong among newer members of the chapter who only know Corax through stories and records, who have idealized him into something approaching a demigod. But the veterans, those who have studied the chapter's history most closely, would recognize immediately that something is profoundly wrong. The being that emerges from wherever he's been hiding would not match the records. The physical differences would be shocking enough, but they could potentially be explained away as the result of whatever he endured in the Eye of Terror. The real problem would be his behavior, his manner of speaking, his apparent difficulty with relating to baseline humans, and even to his own gene sons. The chapter master, currently Kayvan Shrike, would bear the heaviest burden. As leader of the Raven Guard, he would need to balance multiple competing concerns. First, there's the question of whether this being truly is Corvus Corax. The Imperium has enemies capable of impersonation, of creating duplicates or illusions. Alpha Legion tactics come to mind, as do various chaos sorceries. Before accepting the returned Primarch at face value, verification would be necessary. But how do you verify the identity of a being who can alter his physical form at will and exists partially outside normal space? Assuming verification is possible and confirms that this is indeed Corax, Shrike would then face the question of command authority. As chapter master, he leads the Raven Guard and answers only to the Emperor and, in the current era, to Lord Commander Guilliman. Does the return of the Primarch supersede his authority? Traditional Astartes hierarchy would say yes. A Primarch outranks any chapter master. But the Codex Astartes, which has governed the chapters for 10 millennia, doesn't really address the situation of a transformed Primarch returning after being presumed dead. More importantly, should Corax be given command? He's been absent for 10,000 years. He knows nothing of how the Imperium has changed, how the chapter has evolved, what enemies they now face. His understanding of military technology is 10 millennia out of date. His strategic knowledge is based on the 31st millennium, not the 41st. He may possess immense power and tactical genius, but would giving him operational command of the chapter be wise or disastrous? The chapter's chaplains would face their own crisis. Their role is to maintain the spiritual health of the Battle Brothers, to guard against corruption, and to ensure that the chapter remains loyal to the Emperor and true to its traditions. How do they fulfill that role when the Primarch himself exhibits characteristics that would normally be considered signs of warp corruption? Can they counsel him on proper conduct? Can they question his decisions if those decisions seem at odds with what the chapter has become? The librarians, the chapter's psychers, would have perhaps the most disturbing perspective on Corax's return. With their warp sight, they would be able to perceive what he truly is, a being who exists simultaneously in multiple states of reality, whose presence creates ripples in the immaterium, whose very nature challenges the normal boundaries between material and immaterial. Some librarians might find this inspiring, proof that their Primarch has transcended normal limitations. Others might find it terrifying, a warning that even a loyal Primarch can be changed by the warp into something other than human. For the rank-and-file Battle Brothers, the adjustment would be gradual and filled with cognitive dissonance. They've spent their entire lives following doctrines attributed to Corax, following his example as they understand it. Now he's here in person, but he's not quite what they expected. Some would embrace him entirely, reasoning that whatever changes he underwent were necessary to fight the enemies of the Imperium. If the transformation makes him more effective at killing traitors and demons, then it's a price worth paying. These Battle Brothers would defend their Primarch against any suggestion that he might be corrupted. Others would be more conflicted. They would recognize their Gene Father, would feel the bond between Primarch and Gene Son that transcends mere genetic connection. But they would also feel unease in his presence, a primal reaction to something that their instincts recognize as dangerous or wrong. These Battle Brothers would serve loyally, but would always be slightly on guard, never entirely comfortable, wondering if the being giving them orders is truly their Primarch or something else wearing his face. A few, perhaps among the oldest veterans who remember the chapter before certain reforms, might harbor private doubts. They might wonder if it would have been better if Corax had stayed lost, if the chapter had been allowed to continue as it had been. These thoughts would never be spoken aloud, would probably never even be fully formed consciously, but they would manifest as hesitation at crucial moments, as questions that linger too long before being answered, as a reluctance to fully trust. That would undermine operational effectiveness. The successor chapters would face similar crises. The Raptors, the Revilers, the Black Guard, and all the others who trace their lineage to the 19th Legion would need to decide how they respond to their Primarch's return. Some might send delegations to Deliverance to swear renewed allegiance. Others might wait and see how the Raven Guard itself responds before committing. A few might decide that they've been independent too long to accept the authority of a Primarch they've never known, that their loyalty is to the Emperor and the Imperium, rather than to Corax specifically. This latter response would be rare, but not unheard of, in Space Marine history. Successor chapters have sometimes diverged significantly from their founding legion's culture and traditions, developing their own identities over millennia of independent operation. Some of the Raven Guard's successors have adapted to different combat doctrines based on their recruiting worlds or the enemies they most commonly face. They might honor Corax as their genetic progenitor without feeling obligated to follow his command. The question of gene seed would also become pressing. One of the Raven Guard's greatest challenges has been the instability of their gene seed, a problem that traces back to the Raptor Project's corruption and the massacre at Istvan V. If Corax has been transformed by his time in the Eye, has that transformation affected his genetic material? Could new gene seed be harvested from him? Should it be? Would such gene seed carry the same instabilities as the current stocks, or would it introduce new problems? These questions would fall to the apothecaries, the chapter's medical specialists, who maintain the gene seed and oversee the creation of new Space Marines. They would need to examine their Primarch to understand what he has become on a biological and genetic level. But how do you perform medical examinations on a being who can dissolve into shadow? How do you take genetic samples from someone whose physical form is only partially material? The practical challenges would be immense. Ultimately, the Raven Guard would likely reach an accommodation with their transformed Primarch, but it would take time and would never be entirely comfortable. They would serve him because he is their gene father, because loyalty is everything to Space Marines, because abandoning him would be unthinkable. But the relationship would be different from what it had been during the Great Crusade. There would be distance, formality, a certain carefulness that hadn't existed before. The easy camaraderie between Primarch and Astartes that some chapters enjoyed would be impossible here. Corax himself would likely recognize this distance and not particularly care about it. He has spent 10 millennia hunting alone, operating without support, making all decisions independently. He has adapted to not having a legion behind him, to being entirely self-reliant. If his gene sons are uneasy around him, that's unfortunate but ultimately irrelevant to his mission. He would use them as effectively as possible, would value them for their skills and dedication, but would not expect or seek emotional connection. Strategic implications, the perfect weapon. From a purely military perspective, Corvus Corax's return would represent an extraordinary asset for the Imperium. Consider what he brings to the table. A Primarch's tactical genius and strategic vision, combined with unique abilities that make him perfectly suited to fighting the Imperium's most dangerous enemies. In an era where demon Primarchs roam the galaxy, where Chaos Warbands control vast stretches of territory, where the Great Rift itself serves as a highway for demonic incursions, having a being who can operate freely in warp-saturated environments is invaluable. The most obvious application of Corax's abilities would be in the Imperium Nihilus, the Dark Imperium, on the wrong side of the Great Rift, where conventional Imperial forces struggle to operate effectively. The lack of the Astronomican's guidance makes warp travel treacherous in this region. Communications are sporadic. Reinforcement is nearly impossible. Imperial worlds in this area fight alone, believing themselves abandoned by terror, facing enemies who grow stronger while the defenders grow weaker. This is exactly the kind of environment where Corax would thrive. His ability to move through shadows would allow him to navigate the Imperium Nihilus more easily than conventional forces, where normal Imperial fleets must risk dangerous warp jumps or spend months or years traveling between systems. Corax could potentially use his shadow-walking abilities to cover vast distances. If he can move through the Eye of Terror, which is far more unstable than the Imperium Nihilus, then the territory beyond the Great Rift should be navigable for him. He could appear anywhere demons could manifest, which is to say, nearly everywhere in the Dark Imperium. Imagine the strategic possibilities. A Chaos Warband has conquered an Imperial world, establishing demonic corruption and preparing to use it as a base for further expansion. Conventional Imperial forces would need months to organize a response, then more months to travel to the system, then would face a protracted siege to retake it. But Corax could simply appear in the enemy's command structure, assassinate their leadership, and disappear before effective response could be organized. Repeat this process across multiple systems simultaneously, and you effectively decapitate entire campaigns without deploying a single regiment or risking a single warship. His presence would have enormous psychological impact on Chaos forces. Word would spread among traitor Astartes that a shadow kills in the darkness, that no defense is adequate, that even demon-possessed champions fall to an invisible hunter. This would create paranoia and fear, making Chaos forces less effective, causing them to waste resources on defense against an enemy they can't reliably detect. Traitor warbands might avoid certain regions entirely if they believe Corax is hunting there, effectively denying territory to the enemy without firing a shot. Against demon Primarchs specifically, Corax would be one of the few Imperial assets capable of engaging them directly. Normal Space Marines, even in large numbers, struggle to meaningfully threaten a demon Primarch. These beings are immensely powerful, capable of reshaping reality around themselves, virtually immune to conventional weapons. The Grey Knights can fight them, but even the Imperium's premier demon hunters would be hard-pressed to actually kill one of these entities. Corax, however, has proven he can fight them on even terms, even force them to retreat. His demonstrated dominance over Lorgar suggests he could potentially engage other demon primarchs with similar effectiveness. Magnus the Red, whose primary power comes from sorcery, would find his spells difficult to target against a being who exists partially outside real space. Mortarion, slow and reliant on demonic plagues, would struggle to catch a Primarch who can move as shadow. Even Angron, the most martially focused of the demon Primarchs, would find his berserker fury less effective against someone who can simply disappear and attack from a different angle. This doesn't mean Corax would necessarily win every encounter with a demon Primarch. These beings are still extraordinarily dangerous, possessed of powers that can reshape landscapes and obliterate armies. But he could threaten them in ways that conventional Imperial forces cannot, could force them to commit more resources to defending themselves, could potentially even kill them if given the right opportunity and circumstances. Just knowing that a loyal Primarch capable of challenging them exists would change how demon Primarchs approach their campaigns. The strategic coordination possibilities with Guilliman and the Lion would be significant. The Imperium now has 3 active loyalist Primarchs, each with different strengths and capabilities. Guilliman excels at grand strategy, at organizing vast campaigns, and managing the logistical nightmare of supplying them. The Lion is the master of conventional warfare, of achieving battlefield dominance through superior tactics and personal prowess. Corax is the shadow operative, the assassin who strikes where enemies least expect and cannot effectively defend. These 3 could coordinate campaigns in ways that would be devastating to Imperial enemies. Guilliman could identify strategic targets and organize main force assaults to pin enemy armies in place. The Lion could lead the direct assaults, breaking enemy formations and seizing key objectives. And Corax could perform decapitation strikes, assassinating enemy commanders, sabotaging critical infrastructure, creating chaos in the enemy rear that prevents effective response to the main assault. This 3-pronged approach would be nearly impossible for enemies to counter effectively. In the Imperium Nihilus specifically, where Dante serves as regent, Corax's presence would be transformative. Dante is ancient, skilled, and respected, but he's not a Primarch. His authority comes from his position and accomplishments, not from being a genetic demigod. Having Corax operating in the same region would give the Dark Imperium something it desperately needs: a symbol of hope that's more than human, proof that the Emperor's sons have not entirely abandoned them, and a weapon capable of striking fear into enemies that have grown complacent. The relationship between Dante and Corax would be interesting to observe. Dante is over 1,000 years old, has led the Blood Angels through countless crises, and has earned his reputation through millennia of distinguished service. But he would still be infinitely younger than Corax, who has existed for over 10,000 years. The vampire Primarch's Jeanson would owe Corax no particular loyalty or allegiance beyond respect for a fellow servant of the Emperor. How they would work together, how authority would be divided, how conflicts would be resolved. All of this would need to be negotiated. Perhaps most importantly, Corax would bring knowledge. He has spent 10 millennia in the Eye of Terror, learning its geography, understanding its denizens, adapting to its conditions. He knows how demons think, how chaos operates, what vulnerabilities can be exploited. This knowledge, properly applied, would be worth entire armies. The Imperium fighting chaos reactively for 10,000 years, responding to incursions and invasions without truly understanding their enemy. Corax understands. He's lived among them. He's hunted them. He's learned how to kill things that should be unkillable. His training and tactical doctrine could also revolutionize how Imperial forces fight in warp-saturated environments. The Raven Guard's specialization in stealth and precision strikes is effective, but it was developed for fighting in real space against conventional enemies. Corax has refined these doctrines for fighting in the Eye of Terror against demons and traitor Astartes. He could teach Imperial forces how to operate in the Imperium Nihilus more effectively, how to use the region's instability as a weapon rather than simply enduring it as a liability. The Lorgar question, unfinished business. Throughout any discussion of Corvus Corax's return, one question looms larger than all others. What about Lorgar? The demon Primarch of the Wordbearers has been at the center of Corax's obsession for 10 millennia. The Raven Lord's transformation, his hunt through the Eye of Terror, his entire purpose for existing in his current state. All of it traces back to that moment on Istvan V, when Lorgar's throat was within reach of his lightning claws, when victory was stolen by Konrad Kurz's intervention. The prophecy that Corax would be the death of Lorgar hangs over both Primarchs, unfulfilled but never forgotten. Lorgar's own actions since the heresy have been characterized by withdrawal and contemplation rather than active leadership of his legion. For much of the 10,000 years since the Siege of Terra, the Horizon has been in seclusion, meditating on the nature of chaos and the will of the Dark Gods. The Wordbearers have been led by the Dark Council, a group of powerful Dark Apostles who interpret Lorgar's will in his absence. This arrangement has allowed the Legion to function effectively, spreading their corrupting faith across the galaxy, but it has also left them without the direct guidance of their Primarch. Recent rumors suggest that Lorgar has ended his meditation and is becoming active again in the current timeline. If true, this would represent a significant threat to the Imperium. Lorgar may not be the most martially gifted Primarch, but he possesses other strengths that make him dangerous. His charisma and rhetorical abilities allowed him to corrupt entire legions during the heresy. His understanding of faith and belief, twisted though it is, makes him a master at subverting Imperial worlds from within. His connection to Chaos Undivided gives him access to a broader range of demonic powers than Primarchs who serve only one god. If Lorgar begins leading major campaigns in real space, it would inevitably draw Corax's attention. The Raven Lord has spent 10,000 years hunting the Horizon through the Eye of Terror, has pursued him to demon worlds, and through warp storms, has forced him to retreat at least once during that time. He will not stop simply because Lorgar ventures into Imperial space. If anything, having his prey leave the confusing geography of the Eye and enter the more stable environment of real space might make the hunt easier. The inevitable confrontation between these two Primarchs would be one of the defining moments of the current era. It would not be like other Primarch duels we've seen. When Guilliman fought Mortarion during the Plague Wars, it was a clash between representatives of order and entropy, between the Imperium's champion and Nurgle's chosen son. When the Lion dueled Angron during the Battle of Wormwood, it was a meeting of two warriors testing their martial prowess. The confrontation between Corax and Lorgar would be something darker, more personal, driven by 10,000 years of accumulated hatred and guilt. From Lorgar's perspective, Corax represents his greatest failure and his most persistent nightmare. During the heresy, when everything seemed to be going according to the Dark God's plan, when the Imperium was tearing itself apart exactly as the Wordbearers had orchestrated, Lorgar came within seconds of dying on Istvan's black sand. That moment of vulnerability, that instant when he looked up into his brother's black eyes and saw death approaching, has never left him. The prophecy that Corax would kill him has colored every decision he's made since, has influenced his choice to spend millennia in seclusion, has shaped his entire approach to warfare. The Horizon knows he cannot defeat Corax in direct combat. He has proven this multiple times, first on Istvan V, where he needed Kurz's intervention to survive, then during their encounter in the Eye where he was dominated and forced to retreat, and likely in other confrontations that haven't been recorded. Lorgar's strengths lie in manipulation, in long-term planning, in using others as weapons. But against Korax, these strengths are less useful. The Raven Lord is not susceptible to rhetorical manipulation. He cannot be reasoned with or convinced to abandon his mission. He is a simple equation: target identified, target to be eliminated, everything else irrelevant. This makes any confrontation fundamentally unfair from Lorgar's perspective. He is being hunted by someone he cannot defeat, cannot escape, and cannot reason with. The only strategies available to him are avoidance and the use of proxies. He can surround himself with powerful daemon-possessed champions, can call upon greater demons for protection, can hide within fortified positions, and hope that Korax cannot penetrate them. But all of these are delaying tactics, not solutions. Eventually, if they continue to exist in the same region of space, they will meet. And when they do, the prophecy suggests only one outcome. From Korax's perspective, Lorgar is the primary target, the one who must die above all others. Other traitor Primarchs may have fought at Istvan V, may have participated in the betrayal, but Lorgar and his word-bearers are special. They were the ones who corrupted Horus in the first place, who set the entire heresy in motion. They are the zealots who worship chaos as gods, who actively work to spread its influence. If any of the traitor Primarchs embodies everything Korax despises about the betrayal, it's Lorgar. Killing him would not undo the heresy, would not bring back the Raven Guard who died, but it would represent a form of justice. It would prove that betrayal has consequences that persist across millennia. The tactical approach to such a confrontation would favor Korax overwhelmingly. Lorgar cannot hide from someone who can move through shadows and perceive through darkness. He cannot set traps for someone who has spent 10,000 years learning every trick the Eye of Terror can produce. He cannot rely on numbers, because Korax can kill entire squads before they realize he's present. The Demon Primarch's only real chance would be to somehow force Korax into an open battle where Lorgar's sorcerous powers could be brought to bear fully, where he could summon demonic reinforcements, where the scale of conflict overwhelms even a transformed Primarch's abilities. But Korax would never accept such terms. He is a master of choosing when and where to fight. His entire tactical doctrine revolves around striking at the time and place of maximum advantage. He would not engage Lorgar in open battle on a demon world where the Urizen holds every advantage. Instead, he would wait for opportunities, would strike when Lorgar is vulnerable or distracted, would chip away at defenses until an opening appeared. It might take years or decades of patient hunting, but Korax has already demonstrated he possesses that patience in abundance. The death of Lorgar, if it occurs, would have profound implications for both the Word-Bearers and the wider Chaos forces. The Word-Bearers' Legion has functioned for millennia with their Primarch in seclusion, but his death would be different from his absence. It would force the Dark Council to fully assume leadership permanently, would create succession conflicts among powerful Dark Apostles, who each believe they should guide the Legion. It would also fulfill a prophecy, which in the warp carries its own significance. Prophecies are not merely predictions, they are truths that reality bends to accommodate. Fulfilling one changes the pattern of causality. For the Imperium, Lorgar's death would be a significant psychological and strategic victory. One of the primary architects of the heresy would be gone. One of Chaos's most effective corrupting influences would be removed. It would demonstrate that even demon Primarchs are not immortal, that they can be hunted and killed. This would be particularly important for morale in the Imperium Nihilus, where daemon incursions are common and often feel unstoppable. Proof that the most powerful servants of Chaos can die might encourage continued resistance on worlds that are considering surrender. But there's a darker possibility that must be considered. What if the prophet, but not in the way everyone expects? What if Korax's hunt for Lorgar is itself part of some larger plan by the Dark Gods? Chaos operates on timeframes that span millennia, plans within plans that mortal minds cannot fully comprehend. The ruinous powers might allow or even encourage Korax to kill Lorgar if doing so serves their larger purposes. Perhaps Lorgar's death would trigger some kind of ascension or transformation that serves Chaos's interests. Perhaps his martyrdom would inspire word-bearers to greater acts of corruption and devotion. Corax himself might recognize this possibility, but not care. He is not fighting to serve the Imperium's grand strategy or to foil Chaos's plans. He's fighting because he needs to kill traitors, because anything less would be a betrayal of those who died on Istvan V. If the Dark Gods benefit from Lorgar's death, that's a problem for strategists and priests to worry about. Corax is a hunter, and hunters pursue their prey regardless of the larger context. Conclusion: the Shadow's choice. As we reach the end of this exploration, we return to the question we began with. What happens if Corvus Corax returns to the Imperium in Warhammer 40,000? The answer, as we've seen, is complex and carries implications that ripple across military, political, and philosophical dimensions. A being who is simultaneously loyal Primarch and warp-transformed entity, who combines immense power with deeply focused purpose, who represents both hope and horror depending on who's looking, would fundamentally change the strategic situation in the galaxy. The practical military benefits would be immediate and substantial. The Imperium gains a Primarch-level asset capable of operating in environments where conventional forces struggle. The Imperium Nihilus, that benighted region beyond the Great Rift where the Emperor's light barely reaches, would have a defender suited to its conditions. Chaos forces, particularly the Word-bearers, would face a threat they cannot ignore and cannot easily counter. Other Loyalist Primarchs would have an ally whose abilities complement their own strengths in ways that enable entirely new strategic approaches. But these benefits come with costs and complications. The Raven Guard would face a crisis of identity as they reconcile the Primarch they've revered for 10 millennia with the transformed being who returns to them. The Inquisition and other Imperial authorities would need to accept that one of the Emperor's sons has become something other than human, that the line between loyal servant and warp-touched entity is not as clear as they might prefer. The very presence of Corax would challenge assumptions about corruption, transformation, and the nature of loyalty itself. On a thematic level, Corax's return represents something profound about the setting's core concept: that survival requires sacrifice, that fighting monsters sometimes means becoming monstrous, that purity is a luxury the Imperium cannot afford. The Raven Lord is not corrupted by chaos in any traditional sense. He has not fallen. He has not betrayed the Imperium or the Emperor. Yet he has been changed by his experiences in ways that are disturbing and potentially dangerous. He represents what happens when you spend 10,000 years fighting in hell. You don't return unchanged. His transformation also speaks to the nature of Primarchs themselves. These are not simply genetically enhanced humans. They are beings of the warp given physical form, entities that exist simultaneously in multiple states of reality. The flesh they wear is not their true nature, but a constraint, a limitation imposed to allow them to function in the material universe. Corax has shed that constraint, or had it stripped away by prolonged exposure to the eye's energies. What he has become might be what all Primarchs would become if their artificial limitations were removed. This raises uncomfortable questions about the other Loyalist Primarchs. Could Guilliman undergo similar transformation if exposed to the right conditions? Could the Lion? What about the missing Primarchs, whose fates remain unknown? If Corax can transform without falling to chaos, what does that mean for the Imperium's understanding of corruption and loyalty? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're worth asking because they get at fundamental issues about the setting's metaphysics. The story potential is enormous. Corax's return could serve as the centerpiece for campaigns spanning the Imperium Nihilus, for confrontations with Daemon Primarchs, for explorations of what loyalty means in a galaxy where the warp saturates everything. His relationship with his transformed state, his interactions with other Primarchs who knew him before, his efforts to reconnect or not reconnect with the Raven Guard. All of these could be compelling narratives that add depth to the setting. Perhaps most importantly, Corax represents hope of a specific and desperately needed kind. Not the hope that everything will be okay, because in the grim darkness of the far future, everything will not be okay. Not the hope that the Imperium will triumph completely over its enemies, because such triumph is impossible in a setting defined by eternal war. But the hope that justice, however delayed, can still be achieved. That traitors, no matter how powerful they become or how long they hide, can still be hunted down and made to pay for their crimes. That loyalty persists even when everything else has been stripped away or transformed beyond recognition. The Imperium is a crumbling edifice, held together by faith, bureaucracy, and the willingness of its defenders to die in quantities that would horrify any sane civilization. It needs symbols that justify the sacrifices it demands. It needs proof that the fight is not futile, that the enemies it faces can be defeated, that the long night will eventually end, even if that ending lies millennia in the future. Corvus Corax, the shadow that kills traitors, the vengeance that never sleeps, the transformed but still loyal son of the Emperor, provides that symbol. His return would not save the Imperium. Nothing can save the Imperium in any permanent sense, because the setting requires constant crisis and endless war. But it would give the Imperium's defenders a reason to continue fighting, proof that even Primarchs who seem lost can return, hope that the loyal sons of the Emperor are not all dead or fled or transformed into demon princes. In a galaxy where hope is the rarest and most precious resource, that might be the most valuable thing Corvus Corax could provide. So what happens if Corvus Corax returns? The Imperium gains a weapon, loses some certainties about corruption and transformation, and must decide whether a transformed Primarch's loyalty is sufficient reason to accept what he has become. The Raven Guard face a crisis that will define their chapter for centuries to come. Chaos forces, particularly the Word-Bearers, face a nightmare that has hunted them for 10 millennia and shows no sign of stopping. The galaxy's strategic situation shifts in ways that are advantageous to the Imperium, but impossible to predict completely. And somewhere in the darkness, in the shadows that lie between stars, between moments, between material and immaterial, a being that was once Corvus Corax continues his eternal hunt, because justice must be served, because traitors must pay, because even in the grim darkness of the far future, some debts can never be forgiven. The Raven Lord flies again. His wings are shadow, his claws are lightning. His prey awaits. And the galaxy, whether it knows it or not, is about to discover what vengeance looks like when it has 10,000 years to perfect itself. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into what could happen if Corvus Corax returns to Warhammer 40k, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you think about the possibility of the Raven Lord's return, and what other Warhammer 40k topics you'd like to see covered in future videos. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, two of the galaxy's most terrifying forces stand in opposition to one another, not through any grand ideological conflict, but through the simple, brutal mathematics of existence itself. On one side, we have the Tyranids, the Great Devourer, an extragalactic swarm of bioengineered predators driven by an insatiable hunger to consume all biological matter in the universe. On the other, we have Chaos, the primordial corruption that seeps from the warp itself, twisting reality and flesh into nightmarish parodies of natural order. These two cosmic horrors represent fundamentally incompatible forces. The Tyranids seek to harvest, to consume, to convert all biological matter into more of themselves. Chaos seeks to corrupt, to transform, to remake the material universe in its own impossible image. What happens when these titanic powers collide? What occurs when a Tyranid hive fleet descends upon a world already claimed by the ruinous powers, where reality itself has been warped by demonic influence, and the very biomass that the Tyranids crave has been tainted by the touch of the warp? This is not a theoretical question. In the wake of the Great Rift's catastrophic birth, when chaos corruption spread across the galaxy like a psychic plague, the Tyranids have found themselves face to face with this exact nightmare scenario again and again. The answers we've glimpsed are as disturbing as they are fascinating, revealing truths that challenge our understanding